Director Aguera,
Here.
Director Laliotis.
Here.
Vice President Finn.
Here.
The record will note Director Harris and President Bender are absent.
Thank you. Time for the pledge. As you are willing and able, please join us. Tony, would you like to lead?
Sure.
Thank you. Oh, Joe,
Joe?
would you like to join us for the pledge?
I'm sorry. I'm gonna page it.
It's understandable.
Sorry, folks.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Brian, do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
There are no changes this evening.
Thank you very much. All right, item number 5, it is public comment time. This is time that is set aside for the public to address the board on any matter that is not on the agenda this evening. Testimony related to any agendized matter should be addressed at the time that that item is considered. Do we have any public comment this evening? We have public, which is lovely to see, but no comments at this time. Very good. Director update. This is time set aside for directors to comment on any item within the purview of the district, again, that's not on the agenda. So do we have any director comment this evening?
No, I'm just glad to be here.
I'm glad to see you as well.
Thank you.
Nothing here,
Director
thank you.
Lalios? Nothing there? I do have one. I'll try to keep it quick. I wrote it down so I wouldn't get distracted because we have a really juicy meeting this evening. So I would like to report that I attended ethics training this month. I was behind schedule on this, which is totally on me. I knew I had to attend the training, and I did not do so in a timely fashion. I struggle with that core value, timeliness. Anyhow, this has been rectified, and it was a very helpful reminder of what ethical behavior looks like. And I will be happy to attend again in the new year when we have some new faces on this board. And it's a mandatory training, so we'll see you there. Secondly, I attended the 3rd Annual Nevada County Sustainability Summit earlier in September, as did our PIO, Stephen Poncelet. This event is organized by Supervisor Hardy Bullock, and it brings together folks from across our county, across Nevada County, to discuss our shared goals and challenges centered on sustainability. This year, there were 3 panel discussions. The first was on watershed conservation and restoration. The second was on the nexus between recreation and sustainability, a really important topic for our region. And the third was on workforce development. The California Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, was the keynote speaker, and the entire event centered the experience, traditions, and contributions of the people from here, which is the literal translation of Washoe, the Washoe people. So, takeaways from all of the panels that we attended. Sometimes we can't fix the problem. They're big. But we can try to restore the processes, and over time, that will fix the problem. Ecosystem restoration and sustainability are the same thing. Restoration efforts need to be sustained, and sustainability depends on restoration. It creates a positive cascade. In this context, it would help if we could all extend our financing cycles into much longer timeframes. It may only take 1 grant cycle to plant a seedling, but it takes a heck of a lot more to bring that seedling into maturity. And if we don't succeed at that task, we have wasted our time and money in the first place with the planting. So bringing these lessons home to the PUD, the health of our aquifer and our watershed, the watershed that enables that aquifer, and the sources of the power that we deliver are immensely important to the health and welfare of this community. This event was a strong affirmation of this board's decision to elevate watershed health and renewable power in our priorities. I am incredibly grateful to be able to serve at this time with our staff, an amazing, talented, passionate team here at the PUD to support us. And I use the word team, but this is not a game. Climate change adventures, they're just beginning the challenges with climate change. Look to the people of Asheville and try to understand how it feels to have your house and your family and your friends and the very mountain you live on violently wiped away. They are not the first, they will not be the last climate refugees, but we all need to do more. We can do more. but is going to take a real team, which requires us to put aside personal ambitions and agendas to clear the way for our best selves to be able to help and add value to our actions. In the words of the Washoe, all of our land fix with our two hands together. Thank you. It's the recap of the Sustainability Summit, which, it's been an emotional week. That was the director updates. It's time to move on to department updates. What have we got?
Good evening, Vice President Fan, directors, and members of the public. My name is Chad Reed, and I have the opportunity to do the Water Department update. So I've been showing this graphic now for a little while, and the reason I wanted to talk about it today is the red line would be, or the red bar, excuse me, would be that of what is currently happening this year, which is just a few percent over the, what I'm going to call dark blue or solid blue line versus the hashed blue. The solid blue would be that of last year, and then the hash is the running 3-year total. Why is this significant? Even though we're a little bit higher than what we were last year, what we know is coming up in 2025, January 1st of 2025, is the California Conservation, a Way of Life. And as that's coming in, we're going to have to start monitoring this pretty closely for those first 2 years. In 2027 is when we actually have to start living by the decree or by the law that is coming forth. So it's something that we will spend more time on as we go forward, possibly even during a workshop or something of that nature. We'll explain it further and go into more depth with regards to this. I wanted to bring up quickly the projects that we had going on last month. We talked a little bit about the leak that is over on Rainbow Drive and Highway 89. Since then, we were able to, I got to sing Neil Kaufman's praise, and he was able to bend Caltrans' arms and allow us to do an open cut across that road. In so doing, you see the casing that is in the right picture is across the road. That was yesterday. As of today, the asphalt is done and the road is fully back and fully going. We tried to limit the traffic inconveniences, I guess is what I would call it, in order to ensure that that area has water and that we're able to provide water through a redundant system. So we're very happy with how that turned out. We had no incidents and everything was good. So we're ready to keep going forth with that project. My last one I wanted to just bring up is the ski run tank is nearing that of completion. They're in the final stages of finishing up the paint. We're hoping to go into disinfection in the next few weeks. And in so doing, it's one of those things we're excited to bring that tank online and keep moving and take the other tank out, which we know has a leak in the bottom. On the right, though, this is something I'm really excited about. I need to sing the praises of the electric department and the water department collectively. Normally, I just sing the praises of the water, but this time, both of them deserve it. So this is a project where we had an extra generator. We were able to install it, but above and beyond the generator and the redundancy and being able to supply that power, there was also some safety concerns that were identified. And so our operators went and sat down with the electric engineering staff and identified these concerns. They were able to go through and address it and put everything in practice. We're hoping to have all the earthwork done by the end of this week, by the beginning of next week, setting pads and continuing to move on. So it was really nice to see both sides of the house, so to say, coming together, working together, and making a project that addresses so many different aspects of it, from the safety, the resiliency, and making sure that we have the source of water that we need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
I have
you.
a question, Chad, on
Yes.
the Prosser Lakeview crossing. Is that a permanent repair now? Because I know you were contemplating a
Yeah.
temporary repair.
It's a great question. So in the interest of time, I'll do it kind of brief. It's actually both. So this is a redundant water supply that's there. The repair that will take place on the existing water line will be done in spring of 25, and then we'll have both lines there in place. So yeah, it wasn't just the temporary bringing in a pump station or something of that nature, and kind of, I don't mean wasting the money, but not being able to utilize that, so.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Jared.
Good evening, Vice President Finn, members of the board. I'm Jared Carpenter, Electric Utility Director. So updates for the past few weeks here. So for projects, just want to kind of throw out there the West River Street project, which is now partially energized, almost fully energized, frankly. So that has been a really good project, just went really smooth and nice, so been a fun one. There's a new EV charging site that came online just up by the Taco Bell. That's been a fun project too. It's now the largest customer-owned transformer in Truckee, so neat load to add to our system. It's been a fun one. Have that graph up there. Did a little cleaning up from some questions and feedback we've been getting where it's, again, read it as it's the energy sources we got for the month of August. It doesn't include the RECs because you don't apply those till afterwards, obviously, because you wouldn't know how many to buy. But you get an idea of what the supply was, like always. And in this case, it's actually quite similar to last month, so nothing major has changed, really. Next slide, please. So for outages, wanted to call this one out because this was a bit of a major one there. Please forgive my picture there that I took. So it's not the greatest picture, but it's the best on my phone I had. So on 9/19, there was a power pole and conductors, but they're all NV Energy and Liberty poles and lines, not ours. It caught on fire. We heard about it first somehow, but we were there quickly and we informed them. They were there in a bit. It took them a little bit to get there. So we waited for them. And then NV Energy needed to de-energize the entire line while it was still burning. It did eventually break. In the picture, you see the pole is broken there. So de-energize the line up at the main sub. That way it wouldn't have a huge, gigantic arc flash and damage the substation as well when it finally flipped over and came down and crashed down that way. So customers are out from about 9:30 a.m. to 5:30 in Glenshire. It's all of them, because if you go downstream from this line, eventually you hit another substation that then hits another piece of gear that then feeds Glenshire customers. It truly was a coincidence. We're actually working. We have a solution that we've been putting in place for a little bit to engineer a new way of serving them, another way of getting power over there. So we could have had another option to turn them on quickly. So hopefully in the near future, the next 2 years or so, we'll actually have that all built. So it was convenient as a reminder. That's how we're doing this thing, literally at that very moment when it was happening. But the nice thing about this was we were able to re-energize our customers as soon as possible. The repairs took overnight. They weren't done until the next day. But they had to basically find a different transmission source, and then we had to switch our power around to get the power over there. And that took a while because we were really dependent on how fast that they're working. And then the nice thing too is we set up in a way that we wouldn't have to do another outage later on, because when they wanted to switch the system back to its proper state. And our crews we had a person too that spent most of the night there helping them out and watching over their work. So that was an unfortunate outage, and it's I feel like almost every month in the past 7-8 months, I've had an outage that had nothing to do with our system, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So that's the end of my updates.
Thank you, Jared. Jillian.
Good evening, Vice President Finn, members of the board, and the public. A quick update from me. We have a new customer service representative we want to welcome, Jenny Treckle-Bolin. She started earlier this month. And then Haley Robles passed her customer service representative 2 test, so she got a promotion up to level 2. Next slide. We actually don't have anything to present on this because we haven't announced it to the team yet, so we don't want to ruin the surprise. So stay tuned for next month and we'll have double the fun. Thank you.
Stephen.
Good evening, Vice President Finn, members of the board, Stephen Poncelet, PIO and Strategic Affairs. Water remains a very important topic for us in our communications and outreach efforts. The new conservation as a way of life regulations driving that, but it's always been important to us. So indoor regulations, outdoor regulations, water loss regulations, they add up at the wellhead, and that's the regulation we have to meet. For outdoors, it's all about smart landscaping, drought tolerant, native, hardscaping, mulch and weed barriers, and our conservation garden is our tool to help people do that. And in preparation for what we know is coming, we've been sprucing it up, and that, maintaining it, making it look good, getting rid of the weeds, making sure it demonstrates the type of landscaping we think our customers can have, save water. And so we're also working with the town on a water campaign, and Alex Spihalski, our communications specialist, participated in a Visit Truckee Tahoe water event down in Sacramento featuring our water resources. Next slide, please. We also did a bunch of events in the last month and participated in a bunch of meetings. Vice President Finn mentioned the Nevada County Environmental Summit. We had a Placer County Water Agency East Side Board meeting that we attended and made presentations at. We attended the quarterly DIPS meeting on Donner Lake. We attended the Truckee Tahoe Sanitation Agency ribbon cutting and the NCPA annual meeting, and so a couple pictures of the meeting. They did do a cooking competition, and we teamed up with Pluma Sierra Rural Electric. So our own Jared is on the picture to the left there, cooking furiously in the small window we had. Picture of some of us and some of the competitors. And then we did have a visit from Senator Dolly to the event, and so we were able to spend a little time with him and, you know, keeping that relationship solid. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Stephen. So that's it. That's everybody. Okay, awesome. Fantastic. Thank you for those updates. I always value them very much. I appreciate the time you put into it. Now we're moving on to our public hearing. So this is a moment where we get to have a meeting within the meeting. So we're putting aside the regular meeting, and we are now opening up a public hearing. This is a hearing on notice of public hearing for the district's 2024 Public Health Goals Report. We will conduct a hearing to receive input from the public regarding our 2024 Public Health Goals Report. And Chad is back with us for this presentation.
Still good evening. I say we'll start off from there. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about what is the public health goals, what's the process of how do we do this and why are we doing it, followed by who sets the requirements within regards to these public health goals. So let's start off with what is it. So any water districts that serve greater than 10,000 customers have to do this every 3 years. So they put together, they look at all the different requirements that are out there and the goals that have been established, and they're able to, or they put together a report. Now, part of this is they need to talk about what are some of the health concerns of these things and what would be the cost of implementing this and trying to put together that study and knowing what is the ramifications of doing something of this nature. Now, the process, it's the same as what we did 3 years ago, and that is we open a public hearing, as has been done, and we're able to receive comments for the public hearing. And then once the public hearing closes, the board can choose to adopt it or not adopt it, and then once it's been adopted, it would move on to the State Water Resource Control Board, and it would be filed with them. So who sets these requirements? Where are they coming from? What are they? Let's kind of talk for a second about that. So the public health goals are put together by the California Office of Environmental Health Hazards and Assessments, kind of a mouthful with regards to that, or the OHEA. And they're put together just solely on risk. They don't take into consideration the cost. They don't take into consideration the technology that's there. They're not an enforceable measure that is put forth. They are simply going forth and saying, here are these things, and this would be kind of the best case scenario, or this is where they're at. Now, these are not enforceable also. So as I go throughout this report, I'm going to use a word called MCL, or maximum contaminant level, and that is vastly different. That is enforceable. That is set up by the State Water Resource Control Board, whereas the public health goals are not. They're just kind of the pie in the sky best case, so to say. So how do we do this? So this is a collection of all of our data that we are going forth from 21 to 24. And we go and we look at all the testing results. And the tests are actually very particular in how we do it. So the California State Water Resource Control Board dictates how we're going to take these tests. It tells us the labs that we're going to use. So we're going to be using certified operators. We're going to be using certified labs. The process of how it is done is highly regulated, as well as Aqua also works with them to try to make sure that we're all coming up with the best possible methods that there are. So let's get into what are the two elements that we're going to talk about, or the two constituents we're going to talk about. The first is arsenic. So we do a little bit of a background on what it is, what is the possible best available technology, and then we'll go through these. So what is arsenic? It's a semi-metal element. It's naturally occurring in volcanic formations. And so what happens is the mechanical weathering goes on, it starts transporting once the rocks start breaking down through the mechanical weathering process. That's why as we go throughout our aquifer, we'll find certain areas that have higher levels of arsenic and lower levels of arsenic based on how the properties of that aquifer. So as the water is moving around, sometimes it's transporting that arsenic, sometimes it's not. That's why we don't see a completely uniform level of arsenic as we go throughout the system. We have 6 wells that are above the public health goal, but below the maximum contaminant level. Now I'm going to repeat that one more time just to kind of make sure that we're being clear with how this is. Our wells are not exceeding the maximum contaminant level, which is the Water Resource Control Board's requirement. The public health goal is that of 0.004 parts per billion. So we're talking a very, very, very small number. And we have 4 of these 6 wells that are denoted here on the screen. So what would we do about this? So what is the best available technology? First off, we know we'd use some sort of an absorption system and a filter based after the absorption so that we would be able to reduce this. However, due to the nature of how our wells are constructed and how our system is put together, we would have to put one on each of these wells going down. They're not manifolded together. They're not in a way that you could have one central treatment facility and go forth. These treatment facilities are quite costly. To the tune of about $8.5 million is what it would cost us to go out and put the actual apparatuses on the treatment facilities. Then there's the media that goes in this, and that is quite costly also. So that would be increasing the cost of the water to about 7.2 on an ongoing basis, 7.2 million, excuse me, on an ongoing basis. So I did some basic math with regards to this and started saying, so what would that actually do to our customers? So what would you be experiencing? To do the 7.2, you'd be looking at about $528 a year for your customers, or each individual bill would be going up by roughly 50% for just this treatment, nothing else. The second one I'd like to talk about is lead. So the maximum contaminant level, so that would be the enforceable side of this, is 15 parts per billion. The public health goal is 0.2 parts per billion. So in 2009, this was revised. So it used to be 2 parts per billion, but it was taken down to that of the 0.2. The district continues to sample for lead every 3 years. So every 3 years we go out and we call it lead and copper, we do them together. But for this situation, we're going to talk about the lead. So the lead is sampled every 3 years, and they do what's called a first draw test. So how that works is we give the bottles to the customers, and we want to leave that water in that system as long as possible so that it can any lead that's going to leach out would have an opportunity to leach out. So we're trying to make it kind of I guess it'd be worse for us, but the best case to see what is the highest result you're going to get. So we give these customers this bottle, and in the morning they'll pull that sample before anyone takes showers, uses any water in their house. They're going to go and fill this bottle and then return it to us. How we look at it, or how we analyze this is it's sent to a certified lab. They do all the results, and we're looking at the 90% level. So 90% of these tests are lower than the numbers I'm going to tell you, or 10% are above the numbers I'm going to tell you. None of them, though, are exceeding the maximum contaminant level. They're all considerably below. So our 90th percentile number is 7 parts per billion, or less than half of the maximum contaminant level. So again, we have good water. We're very, very pleased with how these results are coming out. In 2017, California Assembly Bill 746 was put into practice. So I told you that we were sampling at the houses every 3 years. In 2017, the Assembly Bill was signed into law, and in 2019, we conducted a survey of all the schools. So we're also looking at schools above and beyond just our houses to ensure that this lead levels that we're talking about are far below that maximum contaminant level. So what is the best available technology? At the levels that we're talking about, we don't have a efficient way of removing that lead. So like I said, the lead is going to be leached out of different parts of the system if there was lead there. And so what we would see is if it was higher, we would go after a corrosion control program, or we'd put something to make sure that water is not as corrosive and leaching that lead out. But we don't have that here. So for us to lower it down below that, we would actually need to go out and do quite expensive studies and go through, and the cost we don't even know at this point, just because there would be so much more involved in studies and different going down that path. So what is our recommendation? I'd like to first and foremost drive home, we are not exceeding any of the maximum contaminant levels. We are totally fine. At this point, our recommendation would be to receive the report and to not implement the arsenic treatment. For the cost that would be associated with it and what is associated there, we would not recommend moving forward with that. We are below the maximum contaminant levels, and we are constantly monitoring, constantly making sure that we are serving a good potable water. So there is no direct physical impact associated with this item, and we would recommend that we conduct the public hearing as we currently are, receive input from the public, and regarding the district's 2024 public health goals report. Thank you, Vice President Finn.
Thank you very much, Chad. We're opening it up to the public to ask any questions they might have or share any comments or thoughts they have on our water public health goals report. I think it's a little better if you come to so we can all hear, make sure we can hear.
Good afternoon, Chris Martinez. I had a question, just, so when you test those certain areas, do you know what kind of pipes are in those neighborhoods? So you can go to specific areas instead of having to do like a wide spread of things?
We're actually, the plan is put together and reviewed by the Water Control Board, and we're purposely trying to spread it out to see more of what the entire system is. Now, it's funny you ask that, because we literally in the last few weeks just finished doing a complete survey of both our side, we don't have any lead on our side, and the other side of the service, which we normally have not done. So I know I'm being very wordy with my answer, but I feel like the public needs to know we take this very serious when we're doing this survey. So if we had any question, we would need to submit that site or that address to modify our current plan, but that plan is approved by the Resource Control Board.
All right, sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I love the water here, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President Finn, I just wanted to add one component to that the testing under the lead and copper rule is based on the customer-owned residential infrastructure. The district doesn't have or hasn't used lead-based products or materials in our distribution system, our pumping systems. And so if you could recall the Flint, Michigan challenge several years back, kind of motivated and created some more restrictive enforcement on customer-based residential and schools. And so what staff is testing is the potential leaching of lead and copper in residential infrastructure based on the water quality of the system. So we're required by the lead and copper rule to test customer-owned facilities, not the district-owned.
Thank you for that clarification.
I can add
Yeah,
one thing to
please.
that, just from my experience. And, the perfect customer for a lead and copper test is a customer that has copper pipes with lead-based solder. And that's, when you look at the list of the criteria that the state gives you to see which houses are eligible for sampling. And, at the top of that list is copper pipes, lead-based solder, especially in our area. So, we do a lot of research, and I know you guys do too, to make sure that the criteria that is valid for the houses that we're sampling. And because I think they outlawed lead-based solder in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a
They reduced the percent of lead material available in materials in the late 80s, and it became zero in the early 90s.
Right. So there is a specific way that we try, that as far as lead and copper testing is which houses are tested. There is a specific hierarchy of which houses are eligible, so that's always implemented.
And it's important to note that kind of the best available technologies for the lead contamination is either replacement of residential infrastructure, which can be very costly and time-consuming, or a sequestering agent that you inject into the water that everybody has. It's that sequestering agent gets delivered to every customer regardless if they have the issue or not. And so you have to really evaluate whether you want to put that sequestering agent, especially if you don't have a particular problem.
Okay, thank you. Director Lilly, that's more helpful.
Okay.
Please.
Comment?
Quick one. Dow Costa. Chad, regarding the arsenic, it showed that there's at least one well that was at 9 parts per billion, right?
Yeah, we have,
Or 2?
yeah.
So what's the trend with those? And do arsenic levels ever go down, or do they only increase?
Generally speaking, what we see is a very consistent testing that we're seeing through those two particular wells. On the one side of where we're talking about, we do have a blend plan. So what we do is the best method of ever doing this is by dilution, right? Is making sure, because if you don't have to introduce a new media, you don't have to do this, and you're able to dilute it with other wells that are in the area, that's the best method that the state is always going to push us to. So what we're currently doing is we do have a blend plan for the one well in particular that we're talking about. So but they've been very steady. They've been very regular. Generally speaking, we do not see them just plummet and it just goes away and we never see it again. It's pretty consistent with what you're seeing. Sometimes you can see it go up a little bit, but in peace of mind, so to say, that monitoring on those sites is very regular, just to make sure that we're catching as soon as we're seeing any change up or down, we're able to make the modifications that we'd need through SCADA control and other methods. So,
Thank you.
yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Yeah, Director Ware.
Chad, since I've been on the board, we did the Hurstville well.
Yeah.
And that was a bad one for arsenic. And then we put a treatment plant in.
Yeah.
It seemed to keep it down within our levels, or below the levels, so. And is the arsenic prevalent through other tanks in the district?
So we do see it in other wells throughout the district, the 6 of the 10. You're right on the Hurstville does have treatment that was installed down there, and it's done a great job. The biggest difference that I would say with regards to the Hurstville versus other wells that we're talking about is the volume of water that it's producing. It's such a small well, that of approximately 35 gallons per minute versus over 2,500 gallons per minute, that the order of magnitude of treatment that we would be doing is vastly different. The methodology would be very consistent. So it's still an absorption media, but it is throughout, we're seeing it throughout different areas, which is very common based on the geology of where we live.
Well, we're gonna get a new water line up there in Hurstville, so.
That's the goal, yeah.
And we're gonna get it from the airport. That's good. And as far as the lead goes, has there been any new development on the lead? Because I don't remember we ever having trouble with lead readings.
So we have had lead in the past public health goals. When it changed back in 2009, it's like arsenic. In 2001, it went from 50 parts per billion down to 10 parts per billion. When it did that was a game changer, and I guess I don't want to make it too big, but it was very significant to the water industry when that happened. There was a lot of wells that were online that people had been drinking from for years, and they instantly, basically by the sign of a pen, were no longer valid, or they were not able to continue to be used. So as they continue to tighten some of these, in this case, goals, but at maximum contaminant levels also, and I hope I'm not muddying the waters between the two there, that as they continue to do this, it is something that we do see technology getting a little bit better, but it does become more and more applicable to more and more constituent, or more and more elements that we're seeing.
Okay. Yeah, there's gotta be something wrong once in a while, I guess.
Yeah.
Is there?
The arsenic situation is, it's denser in some places than it is in others. And, would an earthquake change that somewhat?
I guess the scientist in me would say it's plausible.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
because it's how it is transporting through the mechanical weathering process or that water moving down there in the aquifer. So it could absolutely change things if things are going, but am I gonna say absolute? Well, I couldn't go there, but
Do we still send water samples on Fridays down to Grass Valley for analysis?
we actually are on Tuesday and we're using a different lab, but the principle is the same.
Okay.
Where it is every week we have samples that are going out and we have different labs for different tests because not every lab will do all of the tests that we need. So there's a lot of tests that go into testing this water annually.
Okay. Thank you, Chad,
Yeah, no problem.
for that.
Chad, I had one more question.
Yes, sir.
The blend plan that's been approved by the state, how often do we have to report to the state on that?
On that particular well, or in that particular conglomerate of wells, we're now at a quarterly reporting.
Okay.
It's been consistent long enough. We started off with, well, all the way back, you would go to a daily and then to a weekly and quarterly, and we're up to the quarterly. It's been consistent long enough.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more public or board comments? It's nice to be last because everybody asks all the questions and I don't have to do very much. I would like to just, once again though, the difference between the public health goal and the maximum contaminant level. Goals are goals. We all have goals. We fail to meet them all the time. That does not mean that we are unhealthy or unsafe or anything else. It just means that we're striving to be better all the time. And keeping an eye on our system, that these goals, bring into bear, that we keep a very close eye on all of our things. So when something does happen that does demand our attention, we are on top of it quickly. And I like it that way. I approve. Setting big goals is a good thing to do. So thank you for that report out during the public hearing. Having no more comments, I'm going to bring the hearing to a close and return to our regular meeting, our regularly scheduled meeting. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, and that's it. That's all I have to do for that. Do I have to take action? I'm asking Steve.
No action taken. Receive this report and staff will file with the state.
Okay, we don't have to move to receive the report, or do we? Do we have to make a motion to receive the report? We received it. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing it with us. Okay. Now we have a workshop on tap. And that is all the way back to the beginning. I believe we have Jared is back for workshop on new electric rate options. Jared, take it away for us.
Good evening, Vice President Finn, members of the board, Gary Carpenter, City Director. Okay. This is workshop item number 9. Wonderful. And we're also going to have a consulting company, Aspen, who's probably wrote some of this too, who did some of the work for us. So, but as a reminder for everybody and some background here, so the district, we do a few rate analysis every few years, or cost of service analysis to understand what is the cost to serve our customers, and we set our rates according to those costs. And we do those for a few years, and we stay here a few years. So the one, I left the number there for 2021 and 2023, so we can kind of get a reminder of what the rate changes were in those years. So remember all these things. And one thing that we said kind of back when we did this. Sorry.
No, sorry. I'm sorry as well. I apologize, everybody. I didn't notice that it wasn't on.
Not my fault. I should know better. So, so one thing that we said back when we did this, that those last bullets there, that the energy world is quickly changing, and I just add the words "as forecasted." So it's nothing overly surprising. But everything from droughts, which we've been nice having a couple of years of decent rain and snow, so that's actually been better on the water side for the hydro plants. But the energy markets continue to expand and grow, and customer energy use is growing and also shifting, time, what they're powering, all sorts of things. So the question really is, how do we respond accordingly, giving our customers options to use their power as they see best fit? As another reminder too, so we did our IRP with Aspen at the most 2023, and then also some 2024 there, and brought it to the board. And this slide here is a picture straight from that, and it really shows, this is between, it starts in January 2022 is the far left, and out to September 2040 is the far right. So basically, you see growing there, and I'm very aware everyone probably can't read it from everyone sitting. The orange line going up, growing, that's the largest growing sector, and that's public station EV charging. And as mentioned earlier, another one came online, so it is trending as expected. So no real surprises. But also then the blue line there is residential EV charging. And then we get some lines there with house electrification. Then you'll see where it's actually going negative. That's some commercial solar, which kind of stays flat. You don't expect a lot of that here in Truckee, but you will see the residential one in there in the gray, and electrification, and energy efficiency in the blue down the bottom. So in factoring these things in and going, well, are our current rates applicable and fitting of what our customers are doing? So for this one would tell me right away, oh wow, if it's growing that much on commercial EV charging, we might want to consider a commercial EV charging rate so it meets as our systems are changing. That's kind of where we said, let's go look at a couple things in our rate classes. And so we reached back out to Aspen because they did our IRP, so it was much easier for them to know what we were talking about already, and they have all the data from working with us. And we wanted them to really kind of focus on looking at our NEM, the net energy metering rate. You can call it the residential solar rate if you terms for that, but it's basically if you have solar in your house or you want to put it there and you plan to size it to where it's going to sell power back to the grid, to us, what would you be credited for that? So just kind of look at what we've had that for many years. So just do we need to update it, change it, those kind of things. Also the EV charging rate, looking at a community solar rate, and even a kind of a green rate sort of a thing. Just some options to see how they fit our portfolio and planning. And the purpose of this whole thing here is really to present this and get any feedback from the board and from the community of just what we're showing here. We don't have any hard and set saying this is what we're planning. This really is a workshop to get some feedback before we take the next steps, if we take the next steps. So now I'm going to pass it over to Aspen, and we have Katie, and I believe Joe's there as well. So Katie and Joe, I'll work the slides for you.
Great.
So have at it.
That's lovely. Hi, everyone. Hello, board members. And are there still some people, some attendees there in the room maybe?
Yes.
We appreciate being able to join you via Zoom. So thank you.
Yeah, Katie, there's probably about 12, 15 people here right now, including staff.
Hey, great. Great. I can't see them. So there's two things. As we talk about these 4 or 5 different rate options that Jared identified on the previous slide, and I think there may be one more that we didn't capture in those bullets. There's 2 themes that are going to keep coming up and up. And one of those is worth taking, especially with people in the room or people who are tuning in to listen, might not be familiar with these concepts like us sort of rate nerds, economist utility rate nerds are. So let me walk through one of them. It's called load factor. We care about a customer's load factor because, well, let me first say what it expresses. It expresses the ratio between a customer's load and the customer's peak load. So if we have a customer that consumes at a constant rate, we call that a 100% load factor customer. We build capacity to meet their peak load. So when we calculate that ratio, we can take it either the customer's hourly load versus its peak hourly load, or we can do it relative to the capacity because that peak is also the capacity. So that sometimes we'll mix those 2 things up, and forgive us for doing that. But if you have a customer who uses maybe a little bit in some hours or even none in some hours, and then their load jumps up a whole bunch in some other hours, that's a poor load factor. And what that means, or the implication of a poor load factor customer, is that essentially all customers are paying for the capacity to meet that customer's peak load, but the customer is not using energy to help offset that cost. And so in essence, other customers are subsidizing the lower load factor customer. We'll give you an example here. We've got this graphic to the right that happens to be for electric vehicle charging stations. And the blue line represents the customer's load factor by hour. I'm sorry, not their load factor, it's their actual load by hour. And so if I calculate what the customer's overall use or rating is of the line, how much of the line that they're actually using, it's not going to be 100%. And what we're going to try to do through rates and some ideas that we're going to share with you is create an economic incentive to get rid of that peak that you see up there at hour 13 or 14. And in some hours, some days, it may actually be hours 16 or 18 or 19. And that's the other thing I'll talk about that we care about a lot. We not only care about the customer's load factor, but we care about when their peak load occurs. So it's the load factor and when it occurs. And both of those things are going to get wrapped up in the rate options that we show you. With the issue, again, I said this already, but I'm going to say it one more time. The issue is that you've got to build capacity to meet the peak load. And all customers pay for that capacity, not the customer who's consuming at the lower load factor. And so the bottom line then becomes that those other customers are subsidizing the very peaky use customer. So let's see what we can do about it. Next slide, Jared. We looked at the net energy metering rate, which is the buyback rate, or the rate that you pay to buy excess energy from a customer that has rooftop solar. And this is a group of customers for whom we care about not only the load factor, but we care about when their peak consumption is, or what their consumption is when they come back onto the grid when their solar stops producing as the sun goes down. So the current NEM, we call it NEM, buyback calculation, we recommend adjusting it. And here's why. Your current calculation sets the buyback rate at the average cost of non-firm energy. What we recommend is changing that to instead set the buyback rate at the cost of the marginal energy source or the marginal resource. And that marginal resource is the one that you or Jared purchases last to meet that last increment of demand. And here's a graphic to help explain or try to give you a quick visual of what this looks like. I've got all the hours in the day on the bottom axis, and I've got megawatts going up the side. And there are hours in which we use hydro, and almost every hour at a fairly constant rate to meet demand. So that's an example of a firm resource. The non-firm resources are the resources that we purchase on a variable basis. We don't purchase the same amount in every hour. This is sort of like load factor, but for resources rather than load. And so we're trying to identify the resources that are non-firm. And I've circled them, the ones that you purchase that vary. The quantity that you purchase varies by hour, and I've circled it there. So it would be all those resources that you see within the green circle would contribute to that average cost of non-firm energy. But what we really care about is the resource that's the last unit that you buy, or another way of thinking about it would be the unit that you don't buy because the customer had solar. Anyway, that's depicted over there on the right in the much smaller circle, and it's depicted as being at 7 p.m. at night We're assuming that it's dark by then, or that a significant amount of the solar production has disappeared, and now we have much more energy that we have to buy to serve that customer. We also know that there's research that suggests that customers that have rooftop solar increase their energy consumption in general and in that peak hour, we call it the net peak hour, because it is after the solar has stopped producing on the rooftops and all those customers are coming back onto the system. So here, this is our example trying to explain the adjustment to the calculation that we think makes sense. Next slide, Jared. So besides changing from the non-firm energy resources to the marginal resource, we've got several other suggestions. One is, because of the way that those customers, when their solar stops generating, the way that they exacerbate our net peak problem, we recommend implementing time of use rates for those customers. They would not be optional as your current TOU rate is. It would be mandatory for rooftop solar customers. The problem being that we want to try to mitigate the way that demand jumps up right as the sun goes down. Another thing that you could do is you could intensify the spread between the on-peak and off-peak rates in your time of use structure. That goes back to the load factor issue. We think that the load factor on the rooftop solar generated customers is worse or lower than the load factor for the customers who don't have rooftop solar. We think that you've got the data off of your meters to calculate that load factor for the NEM customers versus the non-NEM customers. We did not analyze that data, though. We thought at first that you might have to do another cost of service analysis in order to get that data, but we actually think you have it off the meters and you could do it today. Depending on what you find in that, what the difference is in the load factor for the non-rooftop solar customers versus the rooftop solar customers, you may want to change the spread between the on and off peak rates in that time of use rate as it applies to the net energy metering customers. The third thing that you could do, or maybe this is the fourth thing that you could do, is we noticed that the cost of service analysis actually showed a customer charge would be justified based on the cost of service that's much higher than what you have in place today. You could ramp up the customer charge. And the customer charge is that fixed portion of the rate design. And so by making that fixed amount a little bit higher, you would more equitably spread around the impact that these customers are having on the system. Now, you might just ramp it up. I've forgotten now what the spread is between what your current charge is and what the COSA said it could be. But it's more than $5. So we thought that maybe you'd want to do this gradually rather than do it all at once. So increase it by $5 per month. Alternatively, we noticed that Liberty Utilities nearby has a $5 per month customer charge. And you could simply use that as a basis for increasing your customer charge. That's just for the NEM customers. It wouldn't be for the non-NEM customers. Okay. So that's all we have on the net energy metering idea. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Joe, unless Joe stares at me funny and says, no, I'm supposed to keep talking.
Good. Thank you, Katie. So I'm Joe Long, also with Aspen Environmental Group, and I'll start going over sort of the new rate options that we started to look at. Next slide, Jared. Thank you. So the first one that we looked at, I'm going to call the third-party charging stations, but we also use commercial charging or public charging stations. They're all kind of interchangeable. But we looked at these charging stations in the district territory and how they operate compared to the large commercial customers. We're focused on the large commercial customers because that's the current rate that they're billed under. But these customers are demonstrably different than the large commercial customers due to their load profile and their load factor, which Katie talked about the concern for low load factor customers earlier. So in the graphic here on the left, we see the electric vehicle charging stations with nearly zero load in the early morning and peaking in the early afternoon. And we compare that to all of the commercial customers as a whole, including the electric vehicle chargers, and nearly all of the variability that we're seeing in these two charts here is caused by those third-party chargers. So the peak demand on the right, where I can't see the graphic exactly, but we're well up around 2,300, I think it is being driven by those third-party chargers. And so the customer load profile suggests that a new third-party rate is needed since these two types of customers impose different costs on the district's infrastructure due to their load factor.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jared can change this or not, but when it changed from me speaking to you speaking, the picture is showing, the little picture is showing the slide deck, but you're showing up really big. I don't,
Oh. Well, hello, everybody.
and so what that means is people are gonna have a really hard time seeing the slide deck.
Okay.
But
Jared,
I don't know how to fix it.
if you let me know what you're seeing, I can go back through the graphics.
I think we're okay, because we have two monitors in here. So
There
one
you
of them, you
go.
are
There you
gigantic,
go.
And the
That
other one is the
fixed it.
screen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, then I'll move along. So basically what I was trying to explain is just the reasoning behind why we want to look at a third-party charging rate. And it's because these third-party chargers are imposing a cost due to their high peak demand and their low load factor, whereas the large commercial customers don't vary very much throughout the course of the day, and they're going to be a much higher load factor. So next slide, and I'll go through some of the options. So here are some of the potential options for a new third-party or commercial charging rate. The first considers looking at the demand charge and increasing it based on the relative load factor. So just comparing the load factor for the third-party customers to the large commercial customers. And the idea is to recover the proportionate cost to the district's distribution and transmission infrastructure to meet that peak demand. And this is done by increasing the demand charge for electric vehicle charging stations to $35 per kilowatt compared to the $16 per kilowatt being charged today, which this aligns their demand charge with their low load factor usage, essentially. The first option is based specifically on the load factor, but the district could allocate the distribution and infrastructure costs in the district's next cost of service analysis with the goal of disentangling these electric vehicle chargers from other customers or other shared facilities, so that way you can more properly allocate the demand cost to those customers. The next option is time of use rate, which you'll probably hear quite a bit throughout today's presentation. The one issue with the time of use rate for the third-party chargers is that they're, private companies, they are not required to pass that rate design on to the end user, essentially. So we want a time of use rate so we can shift usage, so we can have a higher rate during the peak demand to shift people off peak. But if these charging stations are not only charging higher than what the district is charging them, they can, in a sense, charge whatever they see fit. And that means that the end user is not getting that price signal that we want, and because they're the ones making the decision when to plug in their vehicle. So that makes the time use rate potentially difficult, but the main suggestion here is looking at the demand charge and having them pay for their peak demand based on the cost they impose on the system. Next slide.
I'll just mention too for everyone here. Yeah, just real quick, Joe, is for reference, The average commercial rate is somewhere around 17, 18 cents kilowatt hour, depends on a bunch of factors. So you can see that EV car charging companies are charging much more to their users, so to speak, but about 17, 18 cents is about what our commercial customers pay.
Right, and they're charging 49 to 65 cents per kilowatt hour at the plug. So sticking to the electric vehicles, we also looked at the residential electric vehicle charging. And we looked at them because they pose a similar problem when people get home from work or play or whatever they're doing. In the afternoon, they plug in their vehicles and start charging. And that, again, aligns with the system peak demand. And so, again, we would, look to a time of use rate to, again, try and shift usage for residential customers, either overnight or even better during solar and green generating hours. Alternatively, the district may consider to create an opt-in demand response program that would allow the district to ratchet down charging load during those times of system stress. This would absolutely cost more than a time of use program, than a time of use rate, because the program would require you to install additional meters, these two-way controllable meters. So there's the infrastructure costs along with the installation costs. But it would allow for more real-time demand flexibility. The other concern is that some customers may not feel comfortable with the district having control over their own vehicles. And there is some concerns for emergency and evacuation if those cars need to be charged up. So more to come on the residential EV topic, and I think Jared will chime in at the end here on that. So next slide for now. Moving on, I know we're jumping around to a lot of different topics. We have the community solar rate. And what we did is we looked at other California utilities, and we found that the majority either charge a volumetric rate based on the cost of that solar supply, or they offer a fixed cost for each share of the solar capacity and its resulting generation. Some of these are local solar arrays, and then some are just buying solar generation and then passing it along to their customers. So we looked at kind of all of these options. The first option for Truckee is to buy excess solar output from local arrays and then simply pass on the cost of that supply to the customer. The benefit being that this can be implemented quickly, relatively quickly, quicker than constructing a new array. With the negative that the amount of power is uncertain and dependent on how much excess energy is available. The next option, which we dug really deep into, was to build a solar array locally on district property. So on either a TDPUD building or, another site. So we looked at a test case for a 40 kilowatt array, and we priced the system out at around 8 cents per kilowatt hour based on the construction and operation and maintenance costs. We also built this into a spreadsheet model so Jared and the district can size and change the cost assumptions based on whatever the district's potential project scope will be or could be. The benefit here is that there's no transmission costs, and it would be a local community development sort of energy in the district's territory. So lastly, the district could purchase green energy outside of Truckee and then pass along the energy supply cost along with the transmission cost to the customer. Again, this is probably quicker than constructing a new array, but the cost would be higher since you have to pay the transport costs to get the green energy into the district. So likely a higher per unit cost, and you're also competing with other load serving entities for that resource. So I think that's it for community solar, although it'll tie into the next slide. So next slide. So our last new rate option focuses on a Truckee 100% green portfolio rate. This would be for customers who want to go above and beyond what the district's current renewable portfolio is. Some customers may be interested to support California climate goals, and others could receive added revenue benefits from 100% green supply. For an example would be electric vehicle charging stations can receive revenue via the low carbon fuel standard credits. In reality, this rate would be temporary. The district is already on its way to 100% green energy, and the rate would no longer be needed once the district reaches a 100% carbon-free portfolio. The IRP suggests that the district will be 100% by 2030 in the base case. And so this would only be applicable for a few years. And it's really just the incremental difference between what the district's current green portfolio is to 100%. So whether that's 40%, it's actually going to decrease over the years. Some utilities have opted not to offer a green rate because they already are 100% green, such as Alameda, or they are just ahead of their climate goals. Another example is SoCal Edison, who offered a green rate, but they stopped accepting customers since the green resources ended up becoming lower cost than traditional resources. So it's a maybe here, but options for this rate, if it was implemented, include charging customers the marginal cost of whatever that incremental green supply is, so the incremental wind or solar that is purchased. Or the green rate could be packaged with that community solar project, and then the green customers would receive the incremental green supply via community solar. Just to tie that back in. Next slide. So those are all the rate options that we looked at. The next question is then the implementation, feasibility, cost, and equity. So for billing, good news, each of these rates are feasible within the district's current billing system. It will take some time to implement, as we saw with the time of use rate, but the time of use rate also shows that it is possible. These additional rate options will provide greater customer choice, as well as equity among the district's customers. For example, a higher commercial EV rate would eliminate an already existing cross-subsidy. And implementation of these rates will require customer engagement and education, and are expected to be offered on a pilot basis or with grandfather periods, so the district can assess the performance of these rates and then adjust as necessary. This is already being done with the district's time of use rate, and I think we're just probably now starting to get some data on that. Next slide. So finally, Katie alluded to this, we had a couple other rate ideas that came in near the end of our study. And so I'll just cover some of our preliminary thoughts on these, including the industrial water pumping rate and then back to the residential EVs. For the industrial pumping rate, the idea is to optimize the district's water pumping electric load to shift usage away from the district system peak, which should sound familiar to a couple of the other slides we were talking about. This could provide some demand savings to the district in the peak hour of the day, but we still don't know, or we don't understand how much usage can feasibly be shifted while still maintaining reliable water service. So again, more to come here, but the general idea is we could implement a time of use rate specific to water pumping to take advantage of that resource. Next slide, or Jared, if you want to hop in here. Okay, we'll go next. So finally, circling back to the residential electric vehicle charging and the potential DR program, the district has smart meters that could be utilized to introduce the demand response program I previously talked about, specifically for residential electric vehicles. This would be similar to SMUD's Power Direct program, which calls on customer HVACs to decrease energy consumption, and they're paid on a kilowatt hour basis. The meters need to be two-way controllable meters and would be an opt-in program for EV customers specifically. And a DR program like this would be a test or a pilot case to utilize, this advanced metering infrastructure for demand flexibility. And that is all I have, Jared. So I will give it back to you.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, so this is probably the best time for questions before we go into there's no fiscal impact, and this is just to receive the presentation and provide input to staff. So it's really on to a workshop. Any questions or feedback anyone has?
First of all, I'm going to open it up to public comments, even though it's a workshop item. Does anybody have any questions or clarifications that they would like to offer up? Okay, and maybe as we go on, we'll see how that changes. Then to the board for discussion and feedback.
Sure.
Okay, we'll start with Tony.
It's kind of a crazy question, but individual battery systems in homes, is that an option to try and shave this demand response issue? It would seem like if it can, that it could be an added benefit to the customer for short-term backup during power outages, things like that, as well as helping us shave our demand load. So is that something can be considered in addition or to help solve this problem?
Yes, and there are, I don't know the number off the top of my head, there's somewhere around getting close to 330 or so solar arrays in town already, and a decent number of those have batteries. I wouldn't even say it's 5 or 10, it's a lot more than that, maybe 50, it's hard to say, but there's a lot. We see them all the time coming in. So those are certainly helping. The issue here specifically is, so if it's a customer-owned battery with their own solar array, that's already great. It's kind of like, should you pair batteries with solar? That's what we do with basically every large solar array we're looking at right now and that are being built right now to help keep our costs down for the district and meet all the rules we want, all the regulatory things we want. So absolutely, customers should keep doing that, smart. But the catch is we can't control when the battery discharges energy. And let's say we build a network where our meters could talk to those batteries, that would be pretty complicated. And also to talk to every different manufacturer that makes them, that would be quite the lift for our size. Frankly, anyone's would be tough. So we keep incentivizing customers to add batteries to solar, but having it coincident with our grid, that's a pretty tough one. Not out of the question, but pretty tough. What we are doing, as we'll be coming back hopefully next month, is we have done a bid for a battery as part of the budget, and it's out there and we're reviewing it right now. So we plan to add a battery at one of our substation banks, and it's to be used for that exact purpose. We might and probably will pair it with solar eventually, but right now the option of buying the battery it's quite a good idea in today's market. And just to be hyperly clear, just so everyone understands one thing. When it comes to peak demand, whatever the peak demand is for the grid, that's what we have to build to, no matter what. Even if you only use it for 1 minute the entire year, we have to build to that peak. So pretty obvious. But even on the transmission grid, the way we get billed, the way our billing is it's our coincidental peak with the greater grid that we're connected to. Let's just call it Nevada and some parts of California to make it kind of simple. It will be expanding to the entire West as we move forward here. But so like there's months where our peak could be 19, 20 megawatts, but our billable peak was only 12 megawatts because we just happened to be very low when the time that they were peaking. There's other months where it's higher, so it comes and goes. So batteries are pretty powerful. But the idea of linking to the battery in a home, it's a great idea. The only complexity is how our system talks to these many battery vendors in their houses. That's tough.
Can I add one thing, Jared?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, did you want to follow up first?
No, go ahead.
The one additional complexity, there are people across California who are aggregating the use and discharge of batteries. So say I, as a customer, I put a battery on my solar, but then I basically sell my battery capacity to an aggregator who bids it into the Cal ISO for dispatch control for demand response. And so I, as the customer, am no longer controlling that battery. So that's another kind of weird nuance to the home batteries.
And one of the common terms people hear about that is like a virtual power plant. We're all for them, and we do shop for those, in fact, and looking for to meet our energy supply. So we could be shopping for lack of better words, a developer that aggregated 1,000 customers' batteries, and they're selling it in a certain time of day. We might want to buy that, and we do look for those, see if it fits our portfolio. But as Katie said, the complexity of that and other people doing that, it's not easy.
Can batteries on non-solar homes help reduce peak load, not just solar homes?
Yeah, I don't get to engineer much anymore, but when I used to engineer things, I always designed houses to have a much smaller solar array than we'd see today, but a larger battery than we'd see today. So kind of take the roof, size the solar for your load, because the truth is selling back to the utility isn't very advantageous, but the battery can be very advantageous because then you could size it to fill the battery up and then use that to keep yourself off the grid and keep yourself off the utility as long as possible. That's a smaller solar array and a larger battery. It's also cheaper. I probably wouldn't be a very good solar salesman because I'm not selling the bigger array, but it's a smarter way of getting your payback faster. So yes, a standalone battery in a house, very smart idea.
Okay, thanks.
And then you get to this problem, and Joe's done this analysis, although not updated it recently, is that in order for it to pay, that battery in my home to pay for itself, it takes a much bigger spread in the off-peak, on-peak time of use rate than currently applies at most utilities. I mean, I've actually looked at this being a SMUD customer. How wide does the on-peak, off-peak spread have to be in order to pay for my battery? And it takes a bigger spread than is in place today. So that's the problem. Yeah, I love the idea of having a battery, but it's not going to pay for itself.
Yeah, I feel like, we can let those customers make those decisions. I know a lot of folks aren't making those decisions based on it paying for itself. Of course, many of us do make that decision based on it paying for itself. But I think it's always worthwhile to encourage people to do that if they have the means and the will to do it, even though it's not going to pay for itself. The same thing is true with solar, period. That folks who are putting solar on their roof to make money are probably more disappointed than people who are putting it on their roof to, for various other reasons. Thank you for that question, though, because that was on my ask about how do batteries play into this residential solar discussion. This was a lot of information. It was a lot of good information. And these are the things that we have been discussing and thinking about for a long time, knowing that our EV programs are going to be expanding and serving different types of customers. I think we have always elevated our residential customers in our minds for the folks that we're concerned about the most, who we try the hardest to serve, right, particularly reasonably. And this new sort of commercial public EV charging, this is a new entity, this is a new creature we haven't ever discussed before. And to be honest with you, I did not really make the connection that, like, we're charging Tesla, Tesla is charging their customers. So they're taking however much, they're going to charge their customers however much the market can bear, right? That's what corporations do. So they might be making quite a bit of profit off of our energy. I feel like that's low-hanging fruit. I'm pretty sure that you presented approximately doubling them was the number.
It's the demand charge, though, not the energy rate, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's so, and also for EV car charger, like same as our water department, same as any industrial customer, frankly, anywhere. When they see their demand charge, they can make changes and lower their demand. Mm-hmm. They're only going to do it if you give them a reason, but they can shed that little bit. There are these batteries, adding battery, which some of them looked at that, but even just adding software to the technology, it's pretty impressive what they can do with those car charging systems nowadays.
Okay.
So give them a reason, and I bet they lower pretty quick.
Well, I think we should explore that. I think we should explore what we can change about that. And also the time of use rates. I think that's a super useful tool. I mean, we've heard multiple times in various workshops about how if we shave our peak, that is the best way all around, the easiest, theoretically the easiest, because we know changing human behavior is not easy. But if we start to center that a little more and enlist the help of our residents in bringing the cost down for all of us, I think that's a rich area for exploration for, next second generation of rates. And all the way to the M&M's question for rooftop solar, that's hard to communicate to people how it makes sense. Like, people just can't wrap their minds around, I have solar on my roof, why should I be paying? You should be paying me for this energy first, meaning the customer is saying the PUD should be paying them for their solar at top of the market rates, and that, because they're doing us a favor, is I think how a lot of people's mindset is. And it's really hard to explain that once the sun goes down and we have to buy to meet the peak, no matter what, and our peak is so much greater, what you just, that's really hard to convey. It's really, especially, I don't know, succinctly, sensibly, I don't know.
Yeah, you got my mind scrambled.
I know, that's easy, that's the thing, it's easy to scramble, it's hard to unscramble. But it is the reality of the situation. I want people to install solar. I want to encourage them to install solar. I don't want them to think they're gonna make any money off of installing solar. I want them, to understand all of the ramifications for the entire system. Like, the whole system has to work. It's not just your one house, your one, it ties in and it affects all of us. So, I have been saying for years now that it is likely we're gonna start to see our rate structures on the electric side shift a little bit to mirror more closely the water rates, meaning a higher base charge, the higher customer charge that you were talking about to begin with, starting with just our NEM customers. Because the resource is so cheap, but the infrastructure is the same. The distribution system is the same. It costs maybe even more to adjust to those changes. So, again, my personal thought on it is that I sort of support those actions, especially if we can get our communications clear and understandable and explain this to the customers well. Make sense?
If it helps too, just as an FYI, so if you imagine a neighborhood, and imagine in your neighborhood you drive, you see a transformer up on a pole, and that transformer is serving 10 houses. Cool. If every one of those houses were to add an electric vehicle, that transformer might be too small. It's cool. It's fine. We'll swap it out. We do the work. If every house added solar, the transformer might be too small because it's going to want to feed power backwards. So as the profile of customers use energy differently going forward, our infrastructure has to change too, and there's a cost to all that. So how can we do it where we do the most minimal changes, therefore we don't get things going crazy expensive on our system, so we just get very smart about it. These are the kind of things that allow us to get very smart about it. And we love solar in homes. They're great. And we love the batteries. We love EVs. We love it. It's great. It's just saying what we don't want to say is, yeah, keep buying that. Oh, and by the way, here's your price tag down the road, because we weren't thinking in advance. We are thinking in advance. And this is the way of saying we're trying to make sure we don't have some big, gigantic price tag down the road because we didn't think ahead. This is us thinking ahead.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're trying to do, which is what we were trying to do we're always trying to do that. We're always trying to do the best good for the most people at the most reasonable cost. That's our mission. Yeah.
Should we just walk out?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll give you, I will put time limits on just because we have a meeting, a long meeting, I think, because I'm still talking.
That's fine. There's a lot in here, you're right. Would have been good to read ahead. So when I think about this as a family, and I think about making investments in solars, and the promises that were given 5-7 years ago, now you want to hit me, I already made the investment, you're right, I'm losing money. It doesn't, if you do a cost-benefit advantage, there's really no reason to go solar,
Right.
right? You can make better money somewhere else. But now you're gonna hit me because I went solar, because now I'm using it when I wanted to taper off because the sun went down. Why not raise the base rate to those people that you said, the 100%ers, because they're flat, they're predictable, and they probably don't have a family, and they're probably not under cost stress already.
I'm not going to make any assumptions about
I'm
anybody's
just
cost
giving
stress.
you an opposing, I'm just giving you an opposing
Yeah.
view, right?
Yeah.
What you're saying is, those people that really were mindful and want to give back, we're going to hit them again. That's perception.
Can I add one thing? That's a great point. One of the things that staff, this is a workshop, and the feedback there is really important. One of the things staff will bring back when we start to explore these rate profiles a little bit more in detail is consideration, board feedback, and consideration of, the NEM 1 and the NEM successor programs for our customer base who's already invested in something, grandfathered into a NEM 1 program. Future installations would be subject to the successor NEM program and some of the provisions. And if customers want to, all these rate structures are designed for a couple things. And Jared, Catherine, and Joe pointed on, we have these new technologies, the electrification behind the meter programs is to accomplish two things: to change energy use behavior, the characteristics, reduce the load impacts on our system, and reduce greenhouse gas, create more opportunities for green, clean energy. And so when new customers that want to add solar to their homes or businesses would be subject to the successor NEM program. Grandfather in the older installations that were already committed to that. However, if the older installations would like to participate in the time of use rate to further incentivize their behavior change, then transition them to the new NEM successor program so that it's in alignment with it. So I think there's a couple different programs that the board can consider as we go into this kind of arena. And all of these programs incentivizing behavior change, not money making, but cost reduction and greener, more idealistic energy usage.
Thank you for that clarification and reminder that this is just a workshop and we're discussing information and we're exchanging, bringing in all the different perspectives on this complicated issue that we can.
Brian, how many do you know how many customers we have that we buy solar power from every month?
Stephen, do you know that estimated? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's somewhere probably between like 290
200
to
customers?
300 and something and change. I haven't
That we
really
buy
been keeping tabs
power,
on it.
their excess power?
Yeah, depending on the time of the day and the month of the year, and, who's turning lights on and off in the house, but, yeah.
That's kind of an incidental. I think Catherine and Jared have some additional data that in aggregate, our solar customers are actually a net consumer, not a net generator of electricity. Is that correct in your analysis, Catherine?
Wasn't that right, Joe?
Yeah, so actually, it's 290 that are solar customers that have the opportunity to have a net buyback, but that is evaluated at the end of a 12-month cycle, and in aggregate over the course of the year, they're consuming more than they're producing, which would mean you're probably not paying all of those customers for energy. It's probably a smaller subset or a select few that are actually getting that buyback.
Tiny.
Yeah,
I didn't think it hit 200. I thought it'd be way lower than that.
there's over 300 customers with solar on their homes in Truckee. But how many do we, over a period of 1 year, how many are we actually paying them into the year for buying their energy? Extremely few. Extremely few.
Not 200.
No.
Oh, okay.
And Joe, remind us, in the IRP, in the load modifier that added rooftop PV, how many customers per year did we forecast would be added?
Right.
With rooftop PV, it was either 40 or 14. There's a 4 in there.
Right. Well, and it's the difference between by 2040 versus, on a yearly basis. I think it was like 7 customers a year to like 14 customers a year, and depending on which case we look at. So it's not a lot of customers that are coming online to, that would be enforced by the successor NEM. It's really only like 7 customers a year, and that's due to some exemptions in Truckee for rooftop solar. You just don't get a lot of production there. There's not a lot of interest, as we've all said, it's not money making. So the cost benefit analysis means that not a lot of applications are going to the town of Truckee right now.
Okay.
If you look at this one here, one of the reasons why I like this chart a lot to kind of answer that too is if that gray line going down could be as big, but still going down as the orange line going up, this would be awesome. Now, so how do we align it just right? But as you can see, it's much, much smaller. So we're gonna have to keep building our system for some of the customers that are growing exponentially. I don't know if you use the word, but exponentially faster than those adding things to get more efficient. So we kind of have to do something, or else we are going to have to keep rebuilding a lot of wires, making them bigger, bigger transfer, bigger everything, which is pricey to every single solitary ratepayer.
Chris, over there.
Yeah, I just had a question about the batteries, like of them being in the house. Is there any, data or any of the safety of having those there, of them getting too much power and causing fires? I just think of it as just because, the Tesla truck on the freeway a few weeks ago shut it down for like
Right.
12 hours. And think of that as my neighbor's house catching on fire, and their firemen are there for whoever knows how long to put it out. So I just that scares me in that aspect, just by seeing what's happening in these electric vehicles. Like, what's the difference of it being in a house or on the road? If it's more stout, if it has a containment, I guess, like for fuel, but it's a battery. So just wanted to see if you had any input on that.
Katie, did you want to add anything on that, of the dangers of battery homes?
I don't know what the safety rate incursion, is that the right phrase? Issues are with either EV batteries or the Powerwall kind of standalone batteries in homes. I know that our colleagues at Aspen who work on environmental siting do worry about the big battery arrays creating enough heat that fires start. But I've not run into data on the EVs or the wall chargers. I'm familiar with the accident on I-80, or at least know that happened. But I don't know what the rate of problem is.
Yeah, I'd kind of say the same thing too. It's we'd need a lot more examples of it going poorly, especially in homes. But reality is too, we don't dictate what someone does in their home. We're happy to serve power to everyone who has it, and get it there the best way we can. But once it's behind the meter in the house, we're kind of out of our jurisdiction, so to speak, and just how do we support you do what you want to do at home.
There should be a protocol on like what kind of battery, because I'm sure there's different brands that create different power banks. I guess go with the best one that has the least failure. I'm just thinking of, because how are they going to put it out? If they couldn't put that out, think of a house, you know what I mean, a whole neighborhood. So it's just kind of, the whole idea sounds great, but it's just the whole what if and the risk of it.
Well, that's why we bring in experts.
Those are fantastic points. I think as the data starts to accumulate, we're probably going to be more reliant upon uniform construction code and town kind of code enforcement as opposed to the utility. But great points.
Yeah, just figured dealing with, electricity, if you knew anything about that with batteries.
Yep, this is why we bring experts to answer our questions like this, because
There was 3 car fires within those 2 weeks. A truck, and then there was a car fire in Reno, a Tesla car,
Yeah,
and there was the Bird Eye fire that started from electric car. And then I understand those batteries are $400 in the car. to replace that battery.
4,000.
It's like the car, it's the whole car, it's the price of the car. And I
It is?
think the battery is most of the
sales
car,
tax on the battery pack.
but anyhow.
Customer had batteries. That would eliminate that tail that we saw, right, where you see there, right? If every solar customer had a battery, then that little tail on the right side would be gone, right? Because it could be served by their own battery and not drawn off the grid.
Yes, if they ran their battery that way. So they also could say, I'm gonna, you run solar all day and say, you know what, and I charge the battery up and I'm gonna draw the battery in at the exact same time and that thing would go way up. You know what I mean? Like if every house with a battery on a street all said, and let's just say that happens to be, call it 6 PM, if they all said charge now, up it goes, that would jump high.
Well, and that's the incentive of the time of use rate, is having a higher rate during that peak hour. You want to arbitrage with your battery storage, and so therefore you wouldn't draw at that time. You would discharge.
Yeah, it's changing people's behavior. It's asking them to do these things that are not, hopefully, terribly onerous. So that's why I think that's a worthwhile area to explore in our, whatever rate changes we may ultimately land on.
Actually, it's a side topic in a sense, but the battery we're considering, Chris, we're looking at for bid to bid now, there is a lot of things in there related to putting the fire out and working with that. An impressive number of things. So maybe next board meeting, I'll try to share some of that for the fun of it. But we actually went and visited one that was one of our main questions. How do you put this thing out, just in case?
Secondary containment, like for fuel, there's gotta be something for the battery, you know, 'cause
Yep.
so much water gets put into trying to put it out and it still doesn't go out.
Just one last thing that I want to touch on from the board, or just my personal, we talked briefly about solar array as being an option. That is intriguing to me too, because it would put generation within our territory and it would help us with resilience and as we all know ad nauseum now, that we are dependent on Nevada Energy for transmission, and local generation is becoming more and more common, or even in the case of NCPA, it is now standard recommendation that you have generation within your territory. So just as feedback, that option intrigues me, and I would like to learn more or have a more fleshed out, because the cost there actually looked, a weighted kilowatt hour, that's not bad. That's not bad. So that's all for me. Do we have any other,
Well, we can talk on this all night.
I know we can, and that's why I'm winding myself up, so I'm letting other directors wind themselves up if they are ready to. Do you have any more questions or comments?
I'm good. I think maybe at some point in the future, when we revisit this topic, I think it'd also be a good thing to maybe do a primer on what a demand charge is versus an energy charge.
Thank you
'cause
for that.
They're very different. And so in talking about demand charges for commercial EVs, I think it's important to know what that actually means to the whole equation.
You may install a resident meter at your house naturally. Oh man, where did my thought go? Anyway, I was wondering about the rates. The same electricity comes to the house that we turn on the lights with. Do we have to change the panel for a meter like this?
So our existing residential meters today, that are installed and have been for a few years now, they're all, yes, and they're capable of two-way communication right now. So there is no, it's a neat one to have because it's an option available without super high cost. I've got to change all your meters now, do this. So that's an advantage that we have.
Vehicle fuel, electric, is, it would cost the same going into the house. By kilowatt hour with the base, base on it.
So right now in here, there's nothing in here that suggests a real a rate change for the residential customers. And what we're looking at here is, by optimizing our system, what we might say is, if kind of feedback we're getting here from the workshop, what we'll certainly be analyzing next is, all right, let's say we did do a special residential EV rate. How would we apply it? This is where I go, yeah, I like meters, because then you can really control your data and whatnot, and you can watch it, and we know meters, that's our business. So, but if we were to say, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, if we create one for you where you didn't increase our peak demand because your EV car charger, time of use, off-peak, however we did it, we're not going to start adding high cost to them for increasing our peak because they're not increasing our peak. So it's, right now I wouldn't say it's going to go up. I don't think it would go up because you didn't add your peak.
Okay, the same electricity comes into the house and goes into the meter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have a special rate for that meter. I mean, we charge our own charge
Mm-hmm.
for that fill-up, that so much per gallon.
Yep.
And it's just based on a kilowatt, right? The same thing, that same electricity is coming in like everybody else's.
That's right.
And then it goes into that meter, and when it goes into the car, it's a little bit more money. It would have to be, wouldn't it?
Not necessarily.
Meter and.
Yeah. If you installed it, let's say you had a house right now and you lived here for a long time, and you went and bought 4 electric vehicles, and now because each vehicle is drawing significantly more than your entire house draws. But if you said, I'm only going to charge at midnight, and your house is using very low at midnight, and so when you charge the car or whatever, it only came back to whatever your peak was in the peak hour of the day, then you didn't add to our grid. So you wouldn't have to say, well, now you have to pay us more to increase our grid, because you didn't add to our grid. You know what I mean? So I don't want to assume.
Electricity we got coming in anyway.
Yeah.
You don't have to add anything.
Exactly. So sincerely, I can't say, oh yeah, it has to go up. Honestly, it doesn't have to go up. Now, if you want to use it any way you want and add to our grid, and everyone does that, well, then it has to go up because we have to build more. But if we get smart, it doesn't have to.
And us charge the same rate.
Sorry, what was that? I missed.
The meter.
Sorry, what was that?
Are the same rate. Yeah, does Tesla have a price and do we have a price?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They do.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, we're not going to emulate Tesla. We are, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, they're not a local government owned by the community
We're all gonna get fired.
that discusses what we're planning. They have a different module, and they're very, very intelligent, so I love what they're doing, but that's not what we are.
Okay, I think we can probably wrap up this workshop and move on to the consent calendar. Let's see if we can't, thank you very much for sharing all the information, Aspen, Jared, public. I love these conversations. I think they're extremely interesting and helpful to keep having the conversations. Okay, consent calendar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. And then I said thank you and I didn't say goodbye. Goodbye as well. Good night. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
From Aspen.
From Aspen, Joe and Katie. Okay, so do we have any public comment on the consent calendar? No? Do we have any board comments or questions on the consent calendar?
No,
I don't.
did, but I read the.
Yeah, there was a lot of information in the packet on it. Do we have a motion?
I'll move consent.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Guerra,
Yes.
Director Laliotis,
Yes.
Vice President Finn.
Yes.
The record will note Director Harris and President Bender are absent.
Thank you. And this brings us to the first of our action items, number 13, consideration of review of the district's investment policy as described in District Code Title 3, Chapter 3.20.012.9.
Did you say item 15?
I said 13, I hope. I may have said 15, but I hope I said 13.
I heard it wrong.
And for this, we are going to have Mike Selman present for us.
Thank you. Good evening, Vice President
13, review the investment policy and discuss California class as an investment pool. The board reviews the district investment policy annually. Attachment 1 of the staff report is the current investment policy, Title 3, Chapter 3.20.102.9. Staff is not recommending any changes to the investment policy at this time. The board also delegates authority to the treasurer to perform certain duties as described in section of the policy, section 53607 of the California Government Code. Specifically, subject to review, the legislative body may renew the delegation of authority pursuant to this section each year. Currently, the district's investments are comprised of 3 cash equivalent liquid governmental investment pool funds, and we also utilize TDI broker. This is the 3 pools of TDI at the bottom. LAIF is a common local area investment fund used throughout the state of California. Placer County's treasury pool is specific to Placer County, obviously, and also through our participation in the UAMPS JPA, we have funds invested there in that pool. And Time Value Investments is a broker that specializes in governmental entities, particularly in California as well. So this is the historical yields for 5 years for the 3 pools, TBI, as well as a 1-year U.S. Treasury bill. And kind of dead center of the page there is where we hit the bottom. We introduced TBI to grab some additional yield, fixed maturities and CDs and corporate bonds. And then soon there.
Thank you. And then soon thereafter, interest rates began to rise. And so they are now not at anywhere close to historical levels, but they are well below the historical lows of 2020 and 2021. The current Treasury rate is just under 4%, and the current August yields for our various pool funds are listed here at the top right for August. And then the blue box on the left is the new California class pool that we're looking at in this action item this evening, which has a year-to-date yield of 5.4%. The current yield as of October 1st was 5.07, real close to the UPTIF pool rate. Yes, yes, Director Aguirre, they're very similar to CD rates, yes. For all of us. The 3 pool funds have improved over the past few years. However, there's a declining interest rate environment. You should be reading about that. And as yields decline, the curve on the previous page will start to go back down. Particularly within these pool funds that are very short-term in maturity. Their holdings are U.S. Treasuries, short-term U.S. Treasuries, 7-day, 30-day, 60-day, 90 days, that kind of stuff. Fannie Mae's, very high-quality investments, but very short-term in maturity. The TVI holdings that we have are starting to mature, and we're reinvesting those. We need to reinvest those funds as well. Staff has researched yield improvement options while keeping within the investment policy and California regulations. Utilizing a third-party broker like a J.P. Morgan or Merrill Lynch or something like that, they're professionals and they're very good, but that comes at a price, and our investment policy is quite restrictive, as it should be, due to the nature of our public funds. So there's not a lot of bang for buck. Very few public agencies, districts that I'm aware of utilize those type entities. There is a new program out there that staff recommends engaging with California Class, which is a new district pool, would be new to the district as another pool option, and that was established through the California Special Districts Partnership, as I understand it. It was established in 2022. It's called California Cooperative Liquid Asset Securities System, CLASS. It's a joint powers authority investment pool for public agencies. Additional information, a lot of detailed information was provided as attachment 2 in the staff report. There are currently over 200 public agencies in California participating in the CLASS accounts. Here in the local region, the list of participants in CLASS are listed here. And pretty much all these also utilize LAIF. Some of them may use PCIF, Placer, I'm not sure. Fiscal impact. Year-to-date investment income is consistent with budget. It's actually over budget, conservative budget. We don't know what interest rates are going to do now or in the future, particularly when we set budget. But utilizing CLASS as another pool to shift, for example, the maturities of TVI, a lot of our LAIF funds that we're utilizing pretty heavily right now, and shifting those to CLASS could give us a good bang for the buck and improve our overall investment income that the district invests. There are 3 parts to the recommendation this evening. Part A is review the district's investment policy as described in District Code Title III, Chapter 3.20.012.9, and affirm no changes or provide direction as needed. And B, authorize the general manager to execute an agreement with an investment agency, California Cooperative Liquid Assets Securities System, CLASS, to allow for investment of district funds in CLASS. And C, delegate authority to Michael Salmon, Treasurer, to invest district funds according to the district's investment policy. With that, I turn it back over to Vice President Finn. Thank you.
Not on. Thank you, Mike.
What was the percentage on this new company?
Yesterday's yield was 5.07%. Their year-to-date yield is 5.4. That'll be coming down a little bit. It's quite similar to the UPTIF yields that we're seeing so far when I've looked at their historical information. So, yep.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to public comment right now. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will open it up to board comment questions from our side.
All right.
Tony?
So, you know, you mentioned that some of these funds that we have now are responding to the decrease in interest rate environment. How does that compare to CLASS's sort of response to the same decrease in the environment that we're seeing?
Thank you, Director Laliotis. The primary difference is the yield to mature, or the length to maturity, so the durations. So LAIF and PCIF are much shorter in their durations. And so as the yield curves get more normalized, you're going to have a lower yield on those, particularly in a declining rate environment, than UPTIF and the California CLASS, which have slightly, you know, it's still within compliance with all the regulations, but a little bit longer maturities. And so they're able to capture a bit more in yield from the treasuries and other corporate bonds and those type of investments, CDs, those type things.
And then just from a risk perspective, I know our policy probably defines, you know, where we're at on the sort of the risk spectrum. And does CLASS have any different risk characteristics than any of the other funds we're in?
I know that their investment policy has been reviewed by the Special Districts Board. There's a appointed board through that, and they've worked closely with the management company to ensure compliance with the California regulations. I'm not aware of any dramatic differences other than they do go out a little bit longer in their durations, but I don't think they're risking principal as far as, they're certainly not into higher risk corporate bonds or anything like that, junk bonds below AAA, AA type investment grade bonds.
I guess lastly then, I don't see a recommendation on the amount of money to invest in class, or is that something that you're investigating, or what is staff's inclination?
Right now, we utilize all three, and the intention would be to diversify that based on the spreading the entities around. If you look at the detailed investments, a lot of it's exact same stuff, so you're actually technically invested in the same U.S. Treasuries. So good faith and credit of the U.S. government, so not too overly concerned there. I do think there's an opportunity to move more funds in this direction and out of LAIF, because it is showing to have a more robust yield that we should take advantage of. And they are relatively similar in their liquidity. So it's not like we're going to be pinched and I won't be able to make payroll or make a vendor payment for Chad and Jared and all the expenditures they're making. So I'm comfortable with that, the ability to draw funds. They actually pay interest monthly, which is better than LAIF, which pays quarterly. So there's some pros there. So I'm certainly not going to eliminate utilizing LAIF, but I do anticipating getting much heavier into class than LAIF going forward. I do, at the board's pleasure, I would like the flexibility of the dollar amount of how much we move into class, because it is a pool. It's very similar to how we're doing in LAIF and up to, so.
Clear? Okay. Joe, do you have any questions or comments?
We would just add this to our portfolio.
Yes, sir, we would. Yep. It's pretty simple process. Once we get through it and get it set up, it'll be a pretty simple process.
Except we have to deposit some money first.
We do, that's why I do a transfer from LAIF. Yeah, so it's all wire. I don't have to go to the bank.
You're not eliminating LAIF.
Not eliminating LAIF, just shifting funds between pools.
That's one of the good ones, I guess.
Yeah, and, I talked to a few districts, talked at length with the class program directors, demoed their website, everything looks very robust, modern, easy to use. The reports are good.
So we're just adding it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Adding another good option for yield improvement here at the district.
Okay. Yeah, well, Tony once again stole some of my thunder. Yeah, it seemed from my reading of it to be relatively easy to move money around. Just diversifying holdings is always a good thing. I'm reassured by the other districts locally that use this fund. And I have to admit, when I first got on the board and I was looking at our investment returns in those early days of like 2% interest, it was really, really pitiful. It was so bad. I was like, is there nothing we can do to have more robust returns on our investments? So understanding that we are a public district and we are not into risk at all. But again, my reading of this was that it's got all of the same protections that, guarding principle is the number one priority, right?
Correct.
Making money is a secondary goal. So I don't have questions or more to add to that. So,
No, I'm done.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you and thank you. Okay, we've spread all the thanks.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Tony.
What was that, a move?
He made a motion.
So I made a second.
And we have a second.
Yes.
Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Aguirre?
Yes.
Director Laliotis?
Yes.
Vice President Finn?
Yes.
The record will note Director Harris and President Bender are absent.
Okay. Oh, no, it's all good. We're moving forward for our next action item, number 14. We are now under consideration of authorizing the general manager to execute the agreement regarding APN number 019-770-002-000, Gray's Crossing. President Benner's not even here to recuse himself, so perfect. Let's hear our next presentation, Mike.
All right, thank you. Action item 14.
Yep, that's where we're at.
So I'd like to start off by introducing Allison Burns. She is a legal counsel for CFDs for the district, the CFD district, Grace Crossing. Allison, you on the line?
I am. I'm here. Good to see everyone.
Great. All right. Thank you. Allison is with an esteemed lawyer with the Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Routh. Stradling is their short name. Council has been involved in this action item to assist the CFD, and council's markup edits are included in the draft agreement attachment 1. In 2004 and 2005, the TDPUD, Truckee-Donner Public Utility District, Community Facilities District Number 04-1, Grace Crossing, issued special tax bonds totaling $34.5 million. The bonds issued to fund public infrastructure improvements specific to the Grace Crossing development. The CFD's bond debt is repaid by a Melrose special tax assessment. The tax is applied only to the 470 parcel owners of the CFD. And just for background also, the Truckee-Donner PUD is the administrator of the CFD, so that's our role. We're not financially on the hook in any fashion. It's a separate entity. The vast majority of the 407 parcels in the CFD have been paying their respective annual special tax amounts and are current. 3 undeveloped parcels have significant special tax delinquency amounts and have incurred significant penalties and interest charges. I'm going to share that here shortly. For a visual reference in a numbers presentation, the upper left quadrant parcel is the agenda item tonight, APN, and that is directly behind or north of the Catholic Church on Alder Drive in the Grace Crossing development. It's approximately 15 acres. On the bottom right is a parcel owned by the same owner as that parcel we're talking about tonight. And then the upper right quadrant is a DK Alviso-owned property that is currently in planning stages. And in January of 2022, the board of the CFD approved an agreement similar to what we're talking about tonight. That agreement has not come to fruition. They're still working through entitlements with the town, but they're close. We did a time extension a few months ago here in the room, so that one's in play. And then new information, in addition to what we're talking about tonight, I've been advised by the owner of the bottom right parcel in red that parcel is also of interest by the buyer of a similar agreement as tonight. So those are optimistic things to think about, because this has been a long-standing problem. To quantify it, the subject parcel tonight has $2,581,808 circled in yellow in delinquent special tax installment amounts. The other 2 parcels are listed as well here. Those delinquencies have put a strain on making annual debt service payments. So we expect this much, we assess this much each year, and we only get this much. In order to cover that gap, we draw from a thing called reserves. There's a bond reserve that was set up when the bonds were issued, and that reserve's been drawing down. And would not get us to 2035 when the bonds end unless something happens with these 3 parcels. So specifically to the parcel tonight, the first column of numbers is the delinquent special tax amounts to $2,581,807.70. The penalties and interest are the next 2 columns. There's been attorney fees, and then a total right at $6 million. The current delinquency amounts owed for the APN create a significant economic hurdle to enable development of the parcel. Soldier Creek LLC has interest in purchase of the parcel from the Siddiqui Family Partnership, the current owner, if the current delinquency amount owed of $6 million can be reduced. Soldier Creek LLC has presented to CFD as administrator an agreement draft. The agreement is in essence requests an exchange for payment of the special tax installment amounts past due in full of $2.6 million. The CFD will waive all accrued penalties and interest to date of $3.4 million. Payment to the CFD of $2.6 million would be part of the escrow closing targeted for October 31st of this year.
Yeah.
The waiver of current penalties and interest amounts due is in the best interest of the owners of the bonds and the CFD. It cures the special tax delinquency. It also facilitates development of the parcel, thereby reducing the likelihood of future special tax delinquencies. There's some specific California government code in reference to, specific to community facility districts, CFDs, specifically section 53340, paragraph F, has some limitations with respect to the discussions we're having right now in this agreement. Specifically, paragraph C, the waivers shall be available only with respect to parcels sold or otherwise transferred to new owners, unrelated to the owner responsible for the delinquency. The waivers need to also be in the best interest of the debt holders. As I mentioned, Stradling has reviewed this agreement, and Allison is on the phone. We can ask her questions if we have any questions. The fiscal impact is, again, there's no financial impact for the Truckee-Donner Public Utility District itself. It's electric and water utilities. For the CFD, receiving the installment amount of $2,581,807.70 would increase cash for the CFD, replenishing the reserve balance, and decrease the tax accounts receivable balance. Fiscal impact. Further, for the CFD, the billed but not collected penalties of $258,000 and change and interest of approximately $3.16 million would not be collected. The probability of collecting said amounts with current or a future owner are considered very low. The penalties and interest amounts are recorded on a cash basis. Accordingly, no financial impact to the CFD's current financial statements. So because in the accounting, because we know there was like very, very low, it's almost 0% collectability on those penalties and interest with these specific 3 parcels, we have not recorded a big receivable of penalties and interest. So there's no book entry related to the waiver of penalties and interest. There's no financial statements impact with respect to the P&I. So 2 parts to the recommendation, and then I'll open it up for questions. The recommendation is A, this is a recommendation for action this evening. A, determine that the waiver of current penalty and interest for APN number 019-770-002-000 agreement complies with the requirements of Government Code Section 53340F, and B, authorize the general manager to execute the agreement regarding APN number 019-770-002-000, accepting full payment for all installment tax, special tax amounts past due in exchange for waiving current penalty and interest amounts. So, very dry subject, sorry. But,
Well, you made it very lively,
at least I
Mike.
had one picture in there, kind of picture.
Thank you for that. Thank you for spelling it all out for us, dry as it may have been. Do we have any public comment on this item or input? Seeing none. Moving it to the board. Do we have any board comments or questions on this item?
I don't, but I'm glad I got Michael.
You're right. It's nice to have experts, isn't it?
And Allison.
And Allison.
Trust me.
Thank you. Lawyers are important.
Kind of a silly question, but at the end of the day, who's the beneficiary of collecting interest and penalties?
Right? That's a good question.
Typically, I'm happy to answer that if you'd like, Mike.
Great, thank you, Allison.
Typically, those penalties and interests are used to replenish depleted reserve funds and refund administrative funds that may have been depleted in the expenditures necessary to pursue foreclosure proceedings. So typically, they're used for replenishment purposes. If there's excess funds, it can reduce future year assessments, but generally speaking, it's to replenish depleted funds.
Thanks for that clarification.
$3 million. Okay, is that,
Yeah, no, I've always been curious about that because it's like, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm sure there's enough buckets that need to be replenished before it actually creates a decrease in the overall assessment district, which would only benefit the people in that assessment district.
Correct.
Which I'm not necessarily a fan of, but, but I also realize there's buckets that need to be replenished, such as reserves and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, when the assessment district's fully paid out, what happens to the reserve bucket?
The reserve bucket is usually used to pay out at the end, right?
Okay.
We deplete it out. Well, that was interesting with the camera, sorry. We deplete it out as we reach the end.
Great, thank you. No further questions.
no further questions? I don't have any questions either. It seems to me it's of everybody's benefit to just keep this moving. No one's ever going to buy $3 million in penalties. So let's get the money, yeah,
Doing what we're supposed to be doing.
exactly.
So somebody authorize the general manager to execute the agreement regarding APN number 019-019-770-002-000. Attachment 1. Accepting full payment for all installment special tax amounts past due in exchange for waiving current penalty and interest amounts. That's what you wanted, Mike?
Yes, sir, thank you,
I
Director
believe we
Aguero.
have a motion. I believe you just made a motion.
I did.
You did.
I should have started, I'll make the motion. I read it.
Thank you. We connected that
Yeah,
forth. Thank you.
okay.
Do we have a second?
Did Joe's motion include
Oh.
item A? I was unclear on that. It did?
Maybe as
What was that?
staff's recommendation, we need to include item A in
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
motion.
I thought that was just a statement, not a part of the motion.
We have to do both of them.
Okay, then add this
Okay.
to my, determine that the waiver of current penalty and interest for APN number 019-770-002-000. Agreement complies with the requirement of Government Code Section 53340, F in parentheses.
Great.
It's added to the main motion.
So we had B and A. We
Yeah.
have a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Do we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Aguera,
Yes.
Director Laliotis.
Yes.
Vice President Finn.
Yes.
The record will note Director Harris and President Bender are absent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So checking our work. Which brings us to item number 15. I think we're going to have Jared back again in the hot seat. Consideration of Amendment Number 1 to the contract with the Western Area Power Administration for delivery of renewable energy from the Stampede hydroelectric power plants. Another awesome topic.
Good evening, Vice President Finn, members of the board. Okay, just read the topic, so, okay, we'll jump right into it. Let's go into the background of this one. All right, so in 1933, the California legislature first authorized the Central Valley Project. I'll be calling it CVP, probably from here on forward. as a state water project that was unable to finance the project at the time. The Rivers and Harbors Act of 1935 reauthorized the CVP as a federal project and defined its purposes to improve navigation and flood control, to supply water for irrigation, domestic uses, and to generate power. Today, the CVP is owned and operated by the BOR, the Bureau of Reclamation, which is a federal agency under the United States Department of Interior. All right, so what is CVP, these Central Valley projects that are basically owned and operated by WAPA, the Western Area Power Administrator, which WAPA is one of the arms of the federal government that helps the federal government supply power to a variety of military, towns, all sorts of things, including public power entities. So the CVP, which is a bunch of hydro dams, the bunch is actually 11 power plants which is 38 hydroelectric generating units, because most hydros have more than one generator inside of it. That can put out about 2,134 megawatts of power total. And they also have 1,362 miles of high voltage transmission lines. So they're dams. They have a bunch of dams. I added a picture of one of my favorite ones, Shasta Dam. It's not far away. It's over a little north of Reading. I'm sure most folks know where it is. But what we're talking about is the short version of this is WAPA built dams to help power the nation in that, call it mid-30s to 1945, 1950 kind of range. And these dams are incredible. They run our nation. It's the one thing that I always say, I'm not sure we could do it today. They did it then. I don't know how we do it today. I don't think we can, unfortunately. It'd be a fun challenge, but I'm not sure we can. Impressive things they've built. This dam alone, the 2,000 megawatts, this one only does 636. So the scale of these things are just so large and impressive what they built and the years it took to build them. All right, so a little more on this now. So we have a contract with WAPA, Truckee does, and we've had it for a very long time. I have another slide in a minute that basically we also went back around 2022 and we extended it out to 2054. So we already have a contract. So a little background to get into what we're doing here, we're asking for tonight. So with WAPA, the picture there you see on the screen, they own multiple hydro generators kind of across the West. Now these are the kind of ones where, like that dam last picture, this is a hydro dam. It is not a renewable energy generator. It's large hydro. I'm not going to get into how I feel about the definition, but it's just large hydro. So and all operated by BOR, as I mentioned before. And one of the neat things about these dams nowadays, these dams, I'm going to go back into the slide again, they're operated to meet the peak demand of the grid, because it's not just California, it's all over the place, which means they throttle that water coming out of there in the screen, coming out of the front of the dam, they're throttling that water up and down on an hourly basis. It's to meet the peak demand. It's pretty impressive. So neat stuff, so to speak. So what happens is when they have these dams spread out, and the ones in CVP are basically the ones in the blue to the far left, but there are other ones they have too there. But we're talking about the ones in the blue because that's the ones that are applied. We have a very small portion of 0.2% are applied to Truckee to use to meet our allocation of power because we're public power. The other NCPA members, who also essentially every one of them gets an allocation of power. I can't think of one out of the 60 members who doesn't get an allocation of power. They all have some, as I can't think of any anyways. They'll often bundle them together, assign them all to NCPA, who then puts them into the power supply market they don't own and operate them, but they put them in the power supply market to meet the power needs. UAMPS has a similar one, but they call it CRISP, the Colorado River Storage Projects. The Provo River over there, some other very neat ones, again, in that you see in the graph about what they'd be. We don't have any involvement in that because we're not part of that, but point being is UAMPS, as public agencies, and NCPA as public agencies, we all get a small piece of these hydro dams that are so valuable to our nation. So for the Central Valley projects, again, last one I'll show you, but that blue one, so those ones in that blue square there to the far left of California into Nevada, the way when the power comes out of those dams, the first thing they do is they feed the needs of the power project. Then they feed these customers called first preference customers. So often you think of people are like kind of just downstream or right there. And then it goes to base resource customers, whatever's left over. We are a base resource customer. We have a base resource percentage along with all the members of UAMS and NCPA. So in 2022, TDPUD, our base resource contract with WAPA, and it's contract 07 SNR 01026, it was extended starting in January 1st, 2025 and going out to December 31st, 2054. This is our longest contract. We have other ones that, in a sense, are even longer because we have an owner of the generator, like Horse Butte Wind Farm. We own it till it goes away. But this is our longest contract that's in our portfolio. At that time, in 2022, WAPA and TDPUD, we agreed to negotiate a price change related to Stampede Dam as allowed by, it's within the contract, as allowed by the contract. So I'm going to come back to Stampede, because the pieces gets a little confusing, but I'm going to try to get there. All right, so CVP, base resource, it's a take-or-pay contract. I know we've heard that term recently a few times, people come to visit. In this case, and I think in all these kind of cases, basically it means for the base resource contracts and the WAPA dams, they're going to get a minimum payment per month no matter what, or per year, but per month will make it easier. And then whatever it puts out for energy, you pay for the energy on top of that. So they meet their operation needs, their construction costs, the operation maintenance, the transmission costs, repayment obligations, just the common things of doing business. That's what the base cost will be. Then there's an energy component too. Also, I'm sure you heard of this a few years ago, there's the Central Valley Project Improvement Act of 1992, CVPIA. That was one where basically it's a fund that they added to ensure that they're collecting enough money to take care of the environmental things that come along with hydro dams, and there's a lot of them, so they're all quite different, including even decommissioning some of them, bringing them down, and putting the land back to the way it was. I say all that to say, generally speaking, these are really impressive projects, and they have a really neat story from start to finish. And even when they might have made a few mistakes in the 1930s and 40s, they fixed it in 1992. So maybe fixed the wrong term, but they're just really impressive projects. So now, this is where, top of the slide says, why is Stampede unique? Because Stampede is a unique one. And this is Stampede Dam, just right over here, close by. All right, so all base resource energy from Stampede Dam is assigned to Truckee, to us, and City of Fallon, and not other CVP members. We get everything from Stampede, us and Fallon get everything from Stampede Dam.
I thought Portola was in on that.
No, not from Stampede. But they absolutely do for CVP, but not from Stampede. But Stampede's a CVP project. It's very confusing. So it's my best way of explaining it. It's a tough one.
Forgetting Fallon, I keep remembering Portola. I don't know why.
Joe, if you can remember how to figure this and explain this one out, and you could sit here and explain it. I'll sit up there and you explain it to me. It's a complicated one. But simply put, though, Stampede's part of CVP, but unlike the CVP projects that spreads the power out to all these different public power entities, including Plumas and Portola, Stampede uniquely only comes to Fallon and Truckee, partially because of the Truckee River operating agreement, but another story for another day. Historically, the price, which we're here tonight to ask for an amendment to the price, what this dam has been priced around is called the Mid-C, or Mid-Columbia. Mid-Columbia is a price node which is tied to the Pacific Northwest region, which in many ways makes a lot of sense because what does the Pacific Northwest have lots of? Lots of hydro. So whatever Pacific Northwest is doing for pricing is often tied very quickly to hydropower. Where is the Mid-C? If I could show you on a map, I would, but there is no actual node point. So, but when we started pricing this forward of what to look for the price, what new price to use, we spoke with WAPA, great conversations, went down there and saw them, which was a lot of fun to go to the facilities, and with Fallon, and said, well, here's an idea. How about instead of pricing it at the Mid-C point, we price it at the nearest pricing node to the hydro dam, which happens to be Stampede. So I did a little screenshot today of it. You can see the Stampede L node 19. It's a Stampede price node. It's right there. They already have one. So whatever we're going to pay for this, let's tie it to the actual price node closest to Stampede. By sheer economics, it's going to be accurate. It'll be a win-win for, well, in theory, it's right for both the parties. I didn't say win-win, but it's right for both parties, whatever that means. Another little nuance there, again, this is where it gets a little detailed, is we being Truckee and Fallon, we only pay for the base resource energy. So we only pay for the energy. We don't pay a base resource charge. There is no flat fee. If it puts out zero power at a Stampede, which does happen in certain winter months, all the time, the bill will be $0. So there are some fees for our scheduling agents, but not, they're smaller, but we don't pay the minimum fees. It's kind of odd, actually.
Why is that?
I couldn't name another dam that in the WAPA portfolio for the entire West that does this. There very well might be. I just can't name one. I've never seen one before. This one's just kind of an odd one because of that. So,
Jared, I always thought that we get all the energy from Stampede Dam. I thought we only got a little piece, like 3%.
it's shared. First of all, it's not a very big dam. It's a small. It's not very large. Yeah, it's not like that earlier.
They don't produce that kind of power.
Yeah.
I thought we only got a little portion, although we share with
Exactly. We split it with Fallon. And I have a slide in a minute that shows how much about that is per year on average. So I'll just show you the slide when I get there. No problem. So all parties agreed and knew we really need to adjust the price. And we've always known that because there were actually some months where they're operating at a loss because of the setup of the contract. So it's what's best for all parties, frankly. So the fiscal impact of this one, our 2024 power purchase budget is $14.764 million, which includes, remember this, I'm talking 24 right now, which includes 9,770 megawatt hours when we use about 170,000 megawatt hours in the year. So call it 5-6% of our load. From Stampede at a budget of about $469,000. This amendment would forecast to increase that, which I'll come back to that in 1 second, of about $39,000 in 2025 and going forward, which represents about a 0.26 increase within, 0.26 increase within the power supply purchase power budget. So first of all, we've got to be a little cautious with hydro dams because one of the issues with them is if you have a bad hydro year, you have drought, well, they don't put out much power. If it puts out zero power, we don't pay anything. We also don't get any power. So we want to keep cranking, of course, because we don't want to buy that power in the markets. Actually, it's basically that simple. So, and assuming that the price increase of $39,000, again, that's using a bunch of assumptions and metrics of hydro. If you could get it right, then you'd know the weather for the next number of years too. It's impossible to know for sure. What I will say though, generally speaking, if you asked me today, would I rather pay for the power from the price node of Stampede or pay for the power of the mid-C price, I'm taking Stampede.
Why?
Wish I hadn't asked that. It's been tracking less expensive. There are some issues with the hydro powers up in the Pacific Northwest that's been spiking the prices. I don't track their stuff too much because I don't buy much energy from up there. In fact, don't buy any from up there, frankly, especially from hydropower. So there's a bunch of things with their markets and their questions and things they're doing with decommissioning dams, what to do next with the water supply and run of the river and fish, all those kind of things for the Bureau of Reclamation, it increased costs. So mid-C all of a sudden went from what used to be a pretty stable and kind of like, oh, we know what that one's doing, to kind of unstable. Not in the, it's just nothing you want to be, the risk kind of goes up. It becomes unstable. And not in the unstable getting cheap, unstable getting expensive direction. Whereas the Stampede node price, if I analyze the past 3 years and take the averages, and given the past 3 years are reasonable hydro years, you go, oh, you'd prefer the Stampede price node. So it's also fair.
Does the mid-C? Does it vary a lot? I mean, just like what you just described sounds like it's just not consistent. So if it's pegged to that, we're looking at just more accurate?
That's actually a really good question. The answer to that would be, it varies less than some of the node prices, but for the past number of years, it's been just trending to stick kind of high. So just higher than the node prices nowadays.
One of the things we looked at when WAPA came to us about a year and a half ago was what Jared's talking about. I think Jared's done a great job of negotiating here, because the mid-C, like Jared said, for years it was very low, it was stable, and we saw a trend over the last decade of it climbing and starting to get some volatility in the upper end. What WAPA is attempting to do is to mitigate some of their capital costs that haven't been addressed in the previous purchase agreements. And they wanted to use nodes within California that weren't hydrologically reflective of Stampede. And so what Jared's done is create an opportunity here where that node's actually tied to the resource, or at least closer to it, as opposed to speculating what happens in the Pacific Northwest or in the rest of the CVP projects. So I think, as Jared mentioned, it's a win-win with some stability and actual tied to the local hydrology.
The other piece I should add, again, I just told you, that's not a renewable energy resource because it's too big. It's large hydro. It's definitions. Stampede's renewable because it's smaller. Smaller than 30 megawatts equates to renewable. So tying an opportunity to buy power from what is a renewable resource that does help us meet our power content label and everything else of all the renewable pieces at a price tied to the node with no additional costs for like the renewable energy credits, for example, no additional costs for those, it's probably a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is to approve and authorize the board president to sign amendment number 1 to contract 07-SNR-0126 with Western Area Power Administration for the purchase of base resource power from the Stampede Power Plant at a price set to the applicable monthly locational marginal price in the heavy load hours and light load hours through December 31st, 2044. And, sorry.
20 years. Amendment,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, actually, it should say 54.
what's that?
I also lost track of what year it is right now. 2021.
Well, if we pass it tonight, to 44.
That's great. I'm cool with that. Yeah, it's a local.
Yeah, no, sorry, that should say 2054. I might have
Okay, so one more year,
wrong.
okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So it's a 30-year.
Exactly,
We're
it
looking at-
aligns to the contract.
Okay,
Sorry,
very
that's
good.
my mistake. I must have just typed it in there wrong.
You cut it.
What?
It's to 2054.
It's a 30-year contract.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for sharing all of that information with us. I'm going to open it up to public comment. Do we have any public comment on our new WAPA contract, potentially? Seeing none. Back to us. Any questions or comments from the board on this item?
Well, we don't know
asked
what
my
the price
question.
is gonna be
You
yet.
already asked
Let's go
him.
through that equation they have going, I guess.
That's a good question. It really is. So basically, at the end of the month, and this is what we were doing before anyways, at the mid-C point, at the end of the month, WAPA will take every hour of the month and look at the pricing from the, at that price node. And that's a price node, that little dot there. CAISO updates them every 5 minutes or so. You can watch it. I could turn on right now. You'd see it. They're always there. They'll take those prices and they will look at the high load pricing, low load pricing, and then they will apply. Yep.
But we're voting on it for 30 years. I just wonder, do we tie in with something we don't know about? 30 years?
So in a sense, yes. But also keep in mind, we have been doing the same thing for the past
Okay.
30 years. We just chose a different price node closer to home than further away. mid-sea. So,
Okay, thanks, Jared.
Okay. Well, I am all for local renewable energy that makes sense, So, but let's hope that we have a good water year, always. Okay,
I'll move staff's recommendation with the one edit that the date represented shall be December 31st, 2054.
do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Aguirre?
Yes.
Director Laliotis?
Yes.
Vice President Finn?
Yes.
The record will note Director Harris and President Bender are absent.
Okay. Well, we're rounding the bend to the home stretch here. Item number 16, consideration of authorizing a change order allowance for the district pipeline replacement 2024 construction contract from $310,050 to a round number of $620,000. Neil, it's good to see you. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. This is action item number 16. So we'll try to run through this relatively quickly. You know, it's been a long evening already. So the district pipeline replacement 2024 project entails about 5,900 feet of water main at 3 locations on Northwoods Boulevard in the Tahoe Donner area. We had a base bid part of the project, which covered about 4,800 feet of main, and there was an additive alternate with an additional 1,100 feet of main. The town of Truckee will be repaving the Northwoods Boulevard loop during the summer of 2025, and the district coordinated this project with the town of Truckee to perform the pipeline replacement work before the repaving occurs. So we've got an overview map of the project. The 2 areas in red are part of the base bid part of the project. The portion up by Fjord Road is essentially complete. We have some minor paving yet to be completed up there, some AC dike that we still have to install. The portion over by Davos Drive and Swiss Lane, the old pipe has been abandoned, the new pipe is in service, all the customers are on the new pipe. We were doing some paving work today. We've probably got about another week or so over there of paving and general cleanup. The portion shown in green was the additive alternate, and we'll get into that in a second. So the bid opening for the project was held on January 24th of this year. 7 bids were received. The low bidder was Hanson Brothers Enterprises of Grass Valley. Their bid was just under $3 million. The contract was awarded to Hanson Brothers at the February 7th board meeting. The board established a 10% change order allowance, shown here, $295,000 in change. So we had a total authorization of $3,248,500. So again, the work on Northwoods and Slalom is essentially complete. Northwoods at Ramshorn, Davos, Swiss, in service, paving, cleanup, site restoration. The additive alternate over by St. Croix Way, we've not started that, and that's going to be delayed until hopefully May of next year. We can get out early on that and get that done before the town does the paving. We've had 1 change order on the project so far. That involved rerouting and replacing an under drain at Northwoods Boulevard and Fjord. Just over $26,000 for that. The bid schedule for the project is based on unit price bids. The bid for pavement restoration was based on a 4-inch thick pavement section. We're going back in with 6 inches of pavement. The town requires us to match the existing pavement section, and that's what's there. So we're anticipating that the costs for pavement restoration are going to be an additional $200,000 because of that additional thickness. So to date, about $226,000 of the $295,000 and change has already been allocated. As Mr. Reed has discussed already, We have a significant water leak on a pipeline at State Route 80 North and Rainbow Drive. There's a number of issues related to this existing pipe. It is located in the bottom of a roadway cut. It consists of an 8-inch steel pipe inside a 12-inch steel casing. The casing is about 250 feet long. The estimated depth at the west end of the casing is 25 feet. The estimated depth at the east end is 17 feet. That is based on the as-built drawing, and we have gone ahead and potholed that casing at 2 locations earlier in the year as we were trying to determine the best way to deal with the leak. In addition to the depth, we have 2 existing overhead power poles that are located in close proximity to the ends of the casing. There's some existing telecom equipment at the east end of the casing, and this is also the only feed from a water standpoint to about 200 customers in the southern portion of the Prosser Lakeview subdivision. Removal and replacement of the existing 8-inch steel pipe inside the casing would require a temporary pump station or about 2,000 feet of temporary above-ground piping in order for us to maintain service to the customers while that remove and replacement work would be performed. We've got a quick few pictures here. So this is the intersection of Rainbow Drive and State Route 89 looking north. The pipeline runs in parallel with the overhead pole line you can see here in the photo. So as you can see, we're down in a cut. Those banks are about 8 to 10 feet tall. As you look at them, yes, we do indeed have a significant leak. Looking west, the end of the casing is at that power pole. Again, we believe it's about 25 feet deep at that location. Looking east, we're about 17 feet deep next to that pole. A couple more shots of the pole on the east side. You can see the pole, the telecom equipment. Close-up view in there. And this is actually the alignment of the water pipe. It runs essentially in between the green cabinet on the right and the equipment on the left. And again, about 17 feet deep. So about 1,200 feet north of this existing pipeline, we have 2 existing water pipelines that come up to the side of State Route 89, but there's no crossing at that location. We have an 8-inch ductile iron pipe installed in 2002 on the west side of the road, and a 10-inch steel pipe installed in the 60s that parallels 89 on the east side. The terrain at this location is relatively flat, and a new pipeline crossing at this location could be installed quicker and with less disruption to the Prosser Lakeview residents and without the need for temporary facilities. So this is a view of that looking west. The existing pipe is stubbed to the right of way. It's right behind that power pole. If we zoomed it, or excuse me, behind that tree. If we zoomed in, you could actually see there's a property corner stake that's barely visible in the photograph, and we're right next to that. And on the east side, the existing water pipe is running parallel with the pole line. So we held some discussions with Caltrans regarding the 2 potential options to deal with this, one of which the remove and replace the existing pipe, the other option to construct the new pipeline crossing 1,200 feet to the north. And we did receive permission to install a new casing and a new carrier pipe using open cut construction in early September of this year. As we go through that, as Mr. Reed indicated earlier, we would then take the existing pipe out of service and proceed with some sort of rehabilitation option sometime next summer is the plan for that. Now, once we finally received the permission from Caltrans, unfortunately, we didn't have sufficient time to go through our standard public bidding process and construct the work as a separate contract because we're rapidly coming up against the October 15th deadline from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So we requested that Hanson Brothers provide a price proposal to construct this crossing. Their proposal totaled about $325,000. That involves 100 feet of casing pipe, about 825 feet of new 8-inch water pipe, along with some fittings, appurtenances, and pavement restoration. So kind of a review of the finances on this. The original contract price, $2,953,189.50. We have the one approved change order at just over $26,000. Additional pavement costs. So we're estimating the current cost of the project at about $3,180,000. The additional cost of this crossing is $325,000, and so we're requesting an increase in the change order allowance from $295,310.50 to $620,000. The original project authorization, $3,248,500. If the board approves this change, we would have a revised project authorization, $3,573,190. So our capital improvements in the water department have several different financial components associated with the projects. A more complete fiscal impact was included in the staff report on this. A couple quick summary items. At the fiscal year end of 2024, we're anticipating, if this is approved, that the capital reserve balance would be $3.3 million and not the $4.5 million that was originally anticipated within the financial master plan. This project is a component of the water system master plan, though it was not included in the current CIP. And capital expenditures and reserve balances will be updated as part of the fiscal year 26-27 budget cycle, which will be happening next year. And we are anticipating bringing forward a CIP update as part of that. So the recommendation before you is to increase the change order allowance for the district pipeline replacement 2024 construction contract from $295,310.50 to $620,000.
Okay. Thank you very much, Neil, for that information. I'm going to open it up for public comments. Is there any public comments on this item? Seeing none. Back to the board. Do we have any questions or comments from the board on this
That leak
item?
was Rainbow and 89.
Yes.
That was just the pipeline leak. And we gotta pay the bill. So that's my opinion right now, it's not a motion I wanna hear with people. Yeah.
Understood. Any?
Just a question, I guess, from a procedural standpoint. I guess one other option in this situation would be to declare an emergency and dispense the competitive bidding and hire a contractor to do the work, as opposed to this process. Why this choice, I guess?
I think that if we went down the emergency path, and maybe if you want to touch on that a little more, the question would become, which contractor do you choose? Hanson Brothers, we have the existing contract with them. They've been doing good work for us. We have existing bid items within that contract that we went back to in terms of, coming up with the price for this work. And they were on site already, so we kind of avoided any kind of mobilization costs as well. So there were a few advantages to that, and it fit in well with the way the schedule was working out for the existing work that they already under contract. As was already discussed, the casing was put in the ground in the last couple of days, and we think we're going to be able to wrap everything up within the next few weeks and pretty much hit that October 15th deadline.
Right. So in essence, it was a much more efficient process to go
Yes.
through than
Yeah.
establishing the emergency. Okay.
Yeah, one of the additional kind of motivations for this approach would be that the risk of going out to bid, or if we were to declare an emergency and forego the bidding process, finding and determining an available contractor that can mobilize in time when we have Hanson Brothers on site and this work is in their kind of, not the actual location, but the type of work is within their scope of services they're already doing. And so staff was concerned about, as Neil said, if the mobilization process for contractors and availability is always a kind of a roulette game there. So we had contractors on site.
And we have a deadline for the construction people.
Yeah, it is going to snow soon, believe it or not,
I know. You never know.
regardless of the 80-degree weather we had today.
I didn't bring the crystal ball with me today.
Yeah. Well, that satisfies me. Emergency situations are emergency situations. We have timelines, you know, that we can't control. October 15th is the
Right.
thing. So, is everybody satisfied?
Yeah, I guess I'm
Okay.
satisfied.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Do we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Aguirre?
Yes.
Director Laliotis?
Yes.
Vice President Finn?
Yes.
The record will note Director Harris and President Bender are absent.
Hey, the bill's gotta be paid.
It does. There's
Or
no,
we go to jail.
no getting around it. Yeah, people are commenting on it. It's notable. That's my neighborhood,
Yeah,
so I'm
I
glad
don't
you're
know
not.
that we have.
Is it an emergency is the question, I guess.
Well, I think it's significant, you know, and unfortunately, you know, as I went through, we've got a few circumstances of this particular piece of pipe that don't lend itself to, you know, a simple go dig it up, put a repair clamp on it type of situation, which, you know, the great majority.
Best case scenario though, right?
Yeah, well, it's really not possible because the pipe that's leaking is inside the casing. So, and we don't know where within that 250 feet it's leaking. So you essentially have to remove the entire thing, and essentially, once you've pulled it out, it's 50 years old, excuse me, approaching 60 years old, it's from the mid-60s, you're gonna just put new pipe inside. But we have all of these other issues, one of the worst of which is that telecom equipment and that electrical equipment, which would have to be somehow supported or rerouted or done something with, because we're digging excavations that are 25 feet deep and 30 feet long.
So we're going with that new location, the flatter spot.
Yes, and then we'll come back with some sort of trenchless type of methodology that we have to have some more investigations on to rehabilitate the existing pipe so that we can have two feeds to these customers and we're not solely reliant on a single piece of pipe.
Can a ditch witch do that job? Is it big enough of a hole?
I might want to suggest that we have a side conversation and fill in on the details on that. We have a vendor waiting kind of in the wings there.
We did have a motion, we had a vote. We
Yep.
did say things like yes. Okay, great. Moving on to routine business. And yeah, please continue these conversations. We welcome staff educating public and answering all the questions. It's just that it's 9 o'clock. So we have some routine business. We've got item number 17, consideration to approve the treasurer's report for October 2024, which includes the fund balances and the disbursements for July, fund balances for July, 2024, and disbursements for the month of August. So we're gonna pay some bills. That would be,
Public comment?
oh, I'm sorry. Is there any public comment on this item? I forgot. No, okay. Seeing none, do we have a motion to pay the bills?
Yes, we do. And I can include the report, the treasurer's report. I move that we approve the treasurer's report, October 24th, which includes fund balances for the month of July 24, disbursements for the month, August 24th.
Wonderful.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Guerra,
Yes.
Director Laliotis,
Yes.
Vice President Finn.
Yes.
The record will note Director Harris and President Bender are absent.
Okay, which brings us to our last open session item this evening, number 18, consideration to approve the August 7th, 28th, and September 4th, 2024 board meeting minutes. Do we have, excuse me, any public comment on the minutes? Seeing none. Any board comment on the minutes? Anything, anybody? Are you good with the minutes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Great. Then do we have a motion?
I would want to just add, sorry, staff
Okay.
offers one correction to the August 28th minutes for the special meeting. In drafting the minutes, Joe Horvath, we love Joe Horvath, but he was not there at that meeting in attendance.
He was there in
So
spirit.
his name made it into that under staff attendance. So we'll strike that from the meeting record.
Thank you. Okay, so we
I'll,
have a motion. Do we have a motion in a second?
I think we do.
Okay, great.
I'll move approval of the minutes for August 7, 28, and September 4th, with the edit to the August 28th minutes that Joe Horvath was not in the building.
And we had a second, I
Second.
believe. Okay, we do have a second. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Guerra,
Yes.
Director Laliotis.
Yes.
Vice President Finn.
Yes.
The record will note Director Harris and President Bender are absent.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I'm going to suggest a quick break before we move into closed session, but the open session part of the meeting is concluded. I see that Steve you were reaching for your mic.
So I suggest we go ahead and make the announcement that we'll move into closed session under items 19, 20, 21, and 22 as listed on the agenda, and then take a short recess.
Okay, so we will be moving into closed session. As noted on the agenda, items 19, 20, 21, and 22, and then we will take a brief break. Okay?
We're gonna do the closed session?
Yeah, yes, we are. We have officially,
We have a break now.
but we are also going to have a chance to go pee, yes. Awesome.
And I have a wet floor.
Yeah, I know.